What are some respected professions that turned into a joke? Story 1. Bank tellers used to be a foot in the door to the finance industry. Now it's basically 20-year-old credit card salesmen. I remember when I was in college, I interviewed at a national bank branch for a part-time teller position. Maybe it's different at a smaller local bank and/or credit union, though I doubt it, but proved the stereotype of national banks being financial vampires right. Thought the interview would be dedicated to my abilities to break large numbers into smaller bits, like turning a $100 bill into various bits, math skills, knowledge of policies, and/or ability to learn their software. Instead, time was dedicated to how I would try to upsell customers, change their basic savings account to a money market account, convince them to use that bank to take out a loan, or apply for the bank's credit card and other products instead. If you worked at a bank, then you know how they make money. As the first and probably only face that the majority of customers see in the bank, it's important that you are familiar with their products and can recommend them if it comes up in the conversation. Also, what you mentioned are basic elementary math skills. If you don't have basic math skills, you will quickly be fired. You aren't really doing advanced algebra/calculus when you are asking if the customer wants 4 20s, a 10, and 2 5s for his $100 withdrawal. Story 2. Teacher. The complete lack of respect by the government, parents, and kids is astonishing. My mom taught 2nd and 3rd grade for almost 40 years and ended up retiring when they wanted her to admit to hitting a kid, despite a classroom of 25 other kids saying she never laid a finger on him and the video showing it never happened. And the kid admitting he made it up. But his parents were angry and the principal didn't support her teachers. A year later, the kid got a long-term substitute and denied any jobs in the county for an entire year by accusing her of hitting him. Now, I teach at a university and our teacher ed program boasts how its graduates outlast the average of 45 years for people to leave the teaching profession. Though one study says only 17%, if 1/5 roughly of your people who went to a school at least 4 years for something are leaving in the first 5 years. I retired after only 2 years because I was also accused of hitting a child. I was fortunate that the principal had my back and there was a parent who came forward who saw the whole thing. I was exonerated, but it made me realize that I could be accused of anything at any time by any child. Each accusation needs to be taken seriously. What if there isn't a witness that comes forward? Also, an accusation is damning on its own, even if it's totally fabricated. You can't unring that bell. My wife teaches middle school and one of her male colleagues was accused of watching and showing pornography to his students. They took his computers and he actually gave them his phone and told them to turn it inside out if that is what it took. He was out of school for close to a month. He was exonerated because there was zero evidence, but his own denial was insufficient. Fair enough, but still so unfair. What does this teach the student? Even if they're lying, they can still get that teacher removed for close to a month, and since the tips are anonymous, they don't face any repercussions. I have a coworker with school-aged kids who shares this view. I once defended the profession lightly, simply by mentioning that the issues with American education aren't caused by the teachers themselves, any more than a soldier dying on the front line is responsible for global wartime strategy. He disagreed, claiming, well, it's the teachers that are ramming all this LGBT shit down our children's throats. What sucks is I used to believe that anyone could change their mind on something once they understand all of the facts and perspectives, but a response like that is so insipid. I now think a huge number of people are 100% beyond hope. High school history teacher here. I think most of the population would be shocked to learn how much teachers are forced by the administration to get students to pass when the students themselves couldn't care less. In more cases than I'd like to remember, I've done more work to accommodate the students so they can have a shot to get their grades up than the actual student has done to earn the passing grade. Not to mention that to pass my 11th grade regular US history class, you only need to be at a 6th grade reading level and show up sometimes to easily pass. And I work in a high-ranking school district in a large metro area. Story 3. Journalism. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about delivering the news in a timely manner and started being about getting clicks and being the first to report something, even if it might not have been true. As someone who has worked directly in journalism, this resonates a lot. I used to write for a regional paper, and I used to take a shit because my pretty decent articles would be given fucking absurd and childish headlines. People who knew me would see the headlines. They wouldn't read much beyond it. They'd assume the headline reflected my opinion and would fact-check me with things I said in the damn article. I remember once an editor added a headline that completely contradicted the thesis of the piece and made me look like a moron. One of the most frustrating points of my professional life. I actually started lying to people about what I did. I don't think it's necessarily the journalists at fault. Sometimes it is. Rather, people don't see everything behind the scenes and don't understand the current incentive structure of these businesses. Where I used to work, we'd have X number of assignments that would need to be completed. We had one quota for self-ideated pieces and another quota for priority editor-ideated pieces. But we couldn't communicate to readers like, hey, this one is a me thing for something I thought was important. This thing is an editor thing that they thought would get clicks. Please don't judge me for their dumb fuck piece. I've never been more embarrassed by a job than I was by journalism, and I've worked as a male babysitter before. Specifically because of editors and management. Don't even get me started on the stupid guidelines we got from management. I've really noticed lately how poor a lot of journalists are at asking good questions when interviewing. I've cringed a lot. They are just not paying attention to what the interviewee has just said. I've wondered what is happening with journalist training. I watched an interview this week where a female journalist was interviewing a politician. Whenever he digressed the question asked, she didn't just let it go, but instead asked again until he finally gave an answer. She had background information on any topic she brought up and had example studies and citations ready. She even called out his childish behavior when he tried to paint himself the victim. I was so impressed with her work that I looked for more interviews that she did. I still believe she is outstanding at her job, but maybe it just seems more impressive because everyone else is doing such a lousy job at interviews. We've gotten used to superficial questions, unsubstantial talk, and interviewees evading answering the one critical question they got asked. The internet destroyed the newspaper business model and cable TV, and the internet destroyed the need for TV news and its business model. So, the vast majority of news outlets are corporately owned in the USA, as opposed to pre-internet times when newspapers and TV stations were typically privately owned. As for TV news, 40 years ago, I would guess more than 80% of the population knew who Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, and Tom Brokaw were, and most could probably associate them with their specific network. I can't name a single current TV news anchor. Also, there is less TV news now than in 1995. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, etc. don't carry much news programming. They are dedicated to political punditry, which is a different thing than journalism. Headline News, HLN, might have some news programming in the morning, but generally shows 20 hours of forensic files every day. Story 4. Astrologer. Royals used to consult with their astrologers to see what was written in the stars for them, and it was considered a genuine science. Astrology then was far more complex than it is watered down to now. Dr. Justin Sledge from the YouTube channel Esoterica has some great videos on this topic. He does historical/philosophical lessons on ancient religion, or history of modern religion, philosophy, and other forms of occultism and esotericism. Dr. Angela Puka is also a good resource because they aren't 30-year-old women who had a psychotic break and believe they are wise philosophers whilst spewing misinformation and encouraging religious psychosis. They teach this stuff from an academic perspective. It's really cool if you're interested. Before scientific fields became well established, astrology was part of the science known as cosmography, which also included things from other very diverse areas for our standards, like astronomy, geography, history, medicine, agriculture, anthropology, and so on. And so, cosmographers would say astronomy was the field that studied the stars and astrology was the one that described their movements. If we consider only the parts where they limited themselves to describing a star movement, it does not sound like a complete joke. That said, back then, there were already many who would look at the consequences of such cosmic movements on people's lives, and do things like the horoscopes that we still have nowadays. Story 5. Retail. Believe it or not, it was once considered a respectable job. Adults would work full-time for years with the same company, be knowledgeable about what they sold, and make a wage that could support a family. Yep, seeing photos from the 1960s of rows of men in shirts and ties in the television department of a Kmart just blows my mind. He has a wife who stays at home, 2 kids, a car, a detached house, working a job that demanded he know everything about the product and how to answer customer questions, qualify them for a purchase, and guide them to a suitable product, including arranging for delivery. It's a small wonder. A television in 1957 cost nearly the same in absolute dollar amounts as a television today. Today, it's some kid who doesn't speak English making minimum wage who doesn't even look up from his phone as you walk by, if there is even anyone around. For anyone getting nostalgic about pre-internet retail, it was very much because of how ignorant most customers were, though. There were libraries and encyclopedias, but for more practical things, there weren't any YouTube tutorials, reviews, price comparisons, or e-tail shops to browse. You would see an ad on TV, on the radio, or in the newspaper, and then make your way to the store knowing little more than their line of business and a few products on sale. Basically, the balance of power was so lopsided that your retail clerk wasn't just a salesperson but also had to be your domain expert and mini mentor. Obviously, it was a business and they wanted to make sales, but finding a good store was hard enough that customers had loyalty as long as you didn't get too greedy. But with the internet, it got too easy to take advantage of them and order the same item online for less. However, I think malls have already started to kill off the knowledgeable shopkeeper betting on convenience instead. I worked retail in the 80s and hated it. That was mostly because I'm an introvert and found it tiresome to interact with people all day every day, but most of them were reasonable, decent folks. We got the occasional obnoxious crackpot, but they were great happy hour stories. I can't imagine what it's like these days. So many people have entitled attitudes and no manners at all. I'm a long-time retail manager, and I'm here to tell you the people that run these places don't know shit. They leave so much money on the table with the way they treat their employees. Customers bond with employees. Employees have tons of little ways they can make things better at their job or worse. And they can care or not care. I had a customer just today I ran into somewhere else, and they told me they quit coming because the employees were just so drab and unhappy with no personality. My response was, they're not getting paid enough to even start sharing their personality with random strangers. Yep, my dad was an assistant manager of a regional drugstore in California, Long's Drugs, before they were bought out by CVS in the late 2000s. He told me he decided to make a career out of it in the mid-80s because he enjoyed the work and it offered very real growth opportunities without a college degree. He'd tell me stories about traveling to various trade shows, he managed the sporting goods section for a time, and how the company would distribute regular bonuses, as well as the deep relationships he built with his mentors, staff, and store customers. With the salary he made from working there, he, as a single dad, was able to save enough money to buy a decent 3B/2BR house, so my brother and I could move out of our old rented duplex and find some stability. He came up at a time when businesses still saw real value in people. I remember being a teenager when Long's sold to CVS, and I watched and felt how that shitty company treated my dad, who had worked his ass off for the same company for 20-something years. They moved him from salary to hourly pay and then reduced his wages. Then they reduced the number of staff under him, so he had to work twice as hard for even less money. He started drinking more to cope with the increased stress, and this led to more tension at home, and in the end he finally just said, "Fuck it," and quit, because he just couldn't take it anymore. Story 6. Court Jester. Fun fact, one of the Jester's powers was they were the only ones allowed to make fun of the king and be honest, and so kings actually sought the counsel of jesters because they were the only ones allowed to be real with the king with no repercussions. They were allowed to be brutally honest. Of course, some kings still killed them for their brutal honesty, but it wasn't the norm. I just had the great pleasure of experiencing the Figures of the Fool exhibit at the Louvre, which documents the long and deep history of court jesters in Europe as told through hundreds of paintings, illustrations, and literary works. I never understood how integral they were to the development of the modern West. Yes, they were royal entertainers, but they were also often or even exclusively advisors, liaisons, confidants, lovers, etc. They occupied spaces between the margins, the public and the court, and they harnessed real wealth and power in those spaces. Story 7. Chiropractors are on a well-deserved downward slide. I hope this one expedites. The number of posts in local mom groups that are along the lines of, "My newborn infant suddenly can't move their lower limbs. Any chiropractors that see same day? Excuse me, ma'am, you need the emergency room." The problem I have with chiro is how inconsistent the whole profession is. Some don't focus on the spinal cracking and use physiotherapy. Others seem to only crack, and some seem to do it dangerously. I've been to 2 chiropractors and never got my back cracked, and they did physiotherapy type stretches on me and gave me exercises to strengthen my core. I only had to see them twice, and they suggested I wouldn't need to come back if I kept up my stretches. I haven't been back in 5 years. Maybe that is a Canadian chiro thing? I don't know. If a chiropractor ever suggested a crack or some crazy adjustment to me, like neck or spinal, I'd reject the care, but I haven't had to. Story 8. Mail carrier. In the US at least, we had a good half-century where delivering the mail was highly paid, highly respected, and a great job for people who didn't like the typical office/job site routine. In 2024, the pay is subpar and moving towards outright poverty wages. The respect is still high, but waning due to out-of-control junk mail and subpar carriers who don't get paid enough to care. The PO took all of the new technology of the last 2 decades that could have made the job easier and more efficient and used it to micromanage carriers. I did it for a month this year before I got a much better job. I work 12 to 16 hours a day every day in the oil field, and being a mail carrier was harder. The management is awful. There's no AC in the mail trucks. You might have to walk a half a marathon a day. You're always too slow but driving too fast. People will come out of their house and yell at you about their mail being late like you have anything to do with it. 30-minute lunch break where you can only go a mile from where you're at, and the 30 includes driving there and getting back to that spot. No help whatsoever unless you meet someone nice who has a minute or two. And you're expected to know all these different routes somehow. And on Sunday, you have to deliver hundreds of Amazon packages at the speed of light but drive 30. A lot of time the mail truck dies. You can't see out of it for shit, and you gotta go off-road that thing if the route demands it. My first day the back wouldn't close and I lost all the packages on a dirt road while coughing up dust trying not to cry. My new job is challenging and long hours, but nowhere near a cluster like before. Man, we had the best mail carrier. Quick, efficient, friendly, and knew everybody's name on his route. And with it, take the time out of his day to talk to you a little bit and still get his job done. It's been 10 years since he's delivered to my house, and he saw my daughter yesterday. I think it was yesterday and remembered her name when he saw the mail, when he was sorting it. He knew that was her. He's the best mailman ever. He's like the king of the mailmen. Part of the problem is they don't get enough respect from the government itself. I respect the hell out of postal workers. That's not really a job I'd want to do. I'm a city letter carrier. I'm struggling financially and I do my best to try to make my customers happy. If they want their parcels on the back door, if they need me to set them on the kitchen table, if I need to put them in a bag and hang it on their doorknob because their mailbox is too high or they can't get to it because of ice in the winter, if they want me to knock on their window so I can hand it to them because their front door is finicky, I oblige. I run a little, which I know I shouldn't, but it's worth it to make the extra concessions for older customers with greater needs. I don't care who respects me. Teenagers say random shit sometimes, which I ignore, but I respect me, and I'm hoping our current tentative agreement fails miserably, and we go into arbitration for a shot at competitive wages. Source: Tier 2 city letter carrier since 2015. Only 6 years of career though, because I was a CCA slave for 3 years. Story 9. Real estate agents. I mean, my buyer's agent was immensely helpful in helping us navigate the paperwork and process. And being military, I can't imagine buying a house sight unseen, without FaceTime, without one. In modern times, they get too much of a cut, and the whole thing is a pyramid scheme. If I sell my house with a realtor for $400,000, They get $16,000 for posting pictures to a website and letting strangers into my house. Especially during COVID, it was a fucking ripoff. The houses were selling themselves. It's criminal for a buyer's agent to make a commission based on the price of the sale. It means the agents on both sides have a vested interest in finding the highest price that will close the deal. Conversely, when we sold our first home, an agentless buyer showed up and our selling agent turned into a salivating, "You must sell to this buyer." We were young and dumb and she wore us down. We ultimately sold for a full 20% less than what we all agreed would be a good expected acceptance price, and 30% less than our original listing. And she made 65% more commission than should have, versus having to split a full price commission with a buyer's agent. Real estate agents are the scumbags of society, at least where I'm from. They don't answer messages or emails because they are all boomers. You have to call them just to get the phone slammed on your face the second you say that you're young and just getting into the industry, because obviously you won't be able to afford the overpriced shitholes they call houses. And even when you do, they try holding on to your security deposit for dear life, probably agreed with the owner/cleaning companies to get a cut under the table. I've had agents try to deny some of my security deposit back because there was dust under the bed when I left. The new tenants got there 3 hours before the time we agreed, and he was with them. And another one because there was a pan that was dirty, because we all know it takes 60 euros to clean a pan. On top of this, I've been proposing contacts with a different, coincidentally higher price than what the house was listed for, hidden fees, and straight-up illegal contracts. All of this for the modest price of around 1,400 euros per contract, which is almost what I make in a fucking month, for posting an ad with pictures that are so low quality they look like they're from 2004, when there are any, and treating customers like shit. Sorry for the rant, I have a personal problem with these people. Story 10. CEO, business magnate. Believe it or not, the majority of us in the 90s thought the US was a meritocracy, and those people got there by being smart. Turns out it's just nepotism and connections with a smattering of generational wealth. Many years ago, I worked for Georgia Pacific, and we got a new exec VP over our division. He had started with the company as a manual laborer in a paper mill, got his degree at night school, and busted his ass working his way up. Very impressive. Then he went on to only hire 25-year-old MBAs and 6 Sigma consultants. Talk about pulling the ladder up behind you. My response would have been, unless you started the company for people like a lot of tech CEOs, but the more I learn about Gates, Musk, Bezos, Jobs, etc., the more I realize they all grew up extremely affluent with access to better education, technology, connections, financing, and a financial safety net. Not one of them is the rags to riches, bootstraps, we started in a garage story that they like to present. Yeah, seems like all those started my business in a garage types are actually upper middle class students with wealthy parents that not only allowed them to use the garage, but allowed them to spend years not making any money. Allowed them all that free college tuition, free lodging, and probably startup capital isn't nearly the same thing as a working class person starting a business right out of high school. I'm not saying it's not impressive, but it's not the same, not even close. Either that or sleazing your way to the top. The dude from United who suddenly died on the street from what was probably a pre-existing condition had a background in accounting and put all his creativity into things like an algorithm that automatically denied claims. United denies twice the average in the health insurance industry because of that decision, and the company profits billions by denying people the care they're prepaying for through their premiums. Story 11. Taxi drivers used to be super knowledgeable about local geography and attractions. Now they know nothing and just do whatever the app says. Though to be fair, maybe they weren't ever respected for that knowledge. I think taxi drivers were always kind of shit, unfortunately, at least within the last 40 years. Most are probably great, but there have always been shady fucks that would try to scam their fares out of more of their money. When I was a teenager back in the early 90s, I took a cab home from the movies once with a few friends, and the taxi driver pretended like he didn't understand English every time we tried to correct him about going the wrong way or give directions. Meanwhile, he's continually padding the fare. The dude literally added miles. He probably thought he could get away with it because we were kids. We ended up bailing and stiffing him. Story 12. Truck driving. Truckers used to be called the Knights of the Road. Now they're a bunch of clowns. I'm a retired driver. It was a good profession when I started. The trucking industry sucks these days because the companies have unrealistic expectations of the drivers and laws designed to improve the safety of the truck drivers, and everyone around them often run counter to these expectations. For example, big truck drivers are supposed to be limited to 100 kilometers per hour here in Australia and have limits on how long they can drive before taking a mandated break, enforced via mandatory logbooks, along with cameras on major highways designed to track drivers between checkpoints to ensure that their average speed does not break the speed limits. There are also weigh stations that check to ensure that the trucks are not loaded past their regulated load limits. Truck companies, on the other hand, expect truck drivers to reach their destinations at a designated time with no regard for delays, and will penalize the drivers if they arrive late. Like if you hit a traffic jam on the highway, then you could end up losing money on your delivery because you cannot make up that lost time by driving for longer or by speeding. Drivers are also often expected to falsify their logbooks and end up on drugs like methamphetamines in order to stay awake and alert. I work in work comp, and one of our biggest clients is a trucking company. Truckers are some of the most stubborn, petty, whiniest bunch of people. And the union will defend the most useless employees. They'll sit and cry over who gets to take which tractor. They'll refuse to answer calls for extra bids, then file a grievance for pay for hours they never worked when someone else did answer the call. The shit I've read in personnel files is just wild, and half the shit these guys do would get them fired instantly in any other job if they weren't union. I hate to say it, but calling someone a knight of the road when all you need to do is pass a basic course, drive a few dozen hours, and piss clean might generate a sense of entitlement in people who will never appreciate it. I get that in the 60s and 70s, trucking brought a shitload of consumer goods to places that otherwise would have never had them, but give me a break. A kid driving for Amazon is going to endure a lot more than a regional driver, and if you are OTR and have no family or social life, you aren't enduring a whole lot given modern tractors and infrastructure. In other words, modern trucking doesn't create the stress which leads to unhealthy habits, it just attracts people whose unhealthy habits stress them out and make them assholes. Source: 20 years in logistics, met a few gems, some normies, and a whole shitload of whining losers. Yeah, I help with the onboarding process for new drivers at my work. The last 6 drivers we have hired didn't make it past the first week. Supposedly, our corporate does background checks, 1-year experience, valid CDL, safety record, etc. 2 of them never showed up for work. 1 quit after the first day because he didn't like it. 1 crashed the truck before leaving the yard, and the last 2 quit after 3 days because it was too hard. We literally started them off with easy-to-do local moves. Also, the older drivers knew basic mechanical skills and how to keep the rigs and chassis going. The new guy can't drive a stick. A lot of the Volvos are automatics. Does not do safety pre-trip inspections and can't do the simplest repairs like changing a light bulb or putting alcohol in an airline to prevent freezing. I've seen so many chassis being dragged because the brakes are locked up, the fence in the yard is destroyed from everyone backing into it, and several times I've seen the whole container chassis disconnect from the truck and drop on the road because they didn't have it properly locked. Story 13. I remember when I was a kid, you were seen as an ungrateful asshole if you didn't respect the police, no matter what, and at all times. Now it seems that everyone has a certain disdain and distrust of the police, no matter their background. Odd that, isn't it? It is almost as though having the Supreme Court tell us, repeatedly, that the police have no responsibility to protect us as individuals, that really what they do is protect property, that egregious crimes they commit while on duty have blanket immunity, and that presented with a mandate to stop murdering us unfairly, their immediate response was to attack us, and then quit en masse, and in the end, at least where I live, we ended up pretty much exactly where we started. Go figure. Ah yes, who knew that shit all over the public that pays your wages would have a negative effect on their view of you? The police in the US are not the heroes anymore. They've become the villains, far too often, and with no effective oversight for public trust. I've read this about 6 times and my privileged sleepwalked me through it until just now. The police in the US have never been heroes to any but the elite. And maybe not even then. The race game rich people play with poor white people was created to divide us. Don't let it. People who are not white have been terrorized since time immemorial in this country. Lynched, raped, dragged behind horses, whipped, branded, whole thriving neighborhoods burnt to the ground. There are those who confidently declared back during the BLM and George Floyd protests that there was nothing wrong, nothing broken about the institution of law enforcement here. It's working exactly as designed. Police have turned "please don't murder us" into a ridiculous battle between being terrorized or having no cops at all. Don't let us forget the lessons we learned. We may never get another chance. Story 14. Nursing. We went from heroes during COVID to expendable workers, working at a 30% loss of staff they can offer 1.5% yearly raises. It's a total joke. There's no one with experience anymore. About 70% of nurses have been on the job less than 5 years and don't stay anywhere more than 2 years. Not to mention starting rates for new nurses in some areas are as low as $28 an hour for a degree and a license. Pathetic. What doesn't help is the funneling of nurses into nurse practitioners. Instead of paying more for more experienced nurses, they just don't become nurses anymore. This seems to be the case for nurse practitioners in the US and ACP/ANP in the UK. People don't appreciate the jobs of nurses and their experience. Also, most men want to be nurse anesthetists. Hospitals are also to blame because they are owned by conglomerates. I retired from teaching nursing. I could have stayed another year or two, but the candidates for admission and their parents are sometimes insufferable. Then you have university administration getting involved in issues that should be handled on the school level. Loud, whining students get their way and the faculty is not supported. Nursing is too serious to just succumb to students' whims. Story 15. The counseling profession is currently in limbo. Consumers do not realize the atrocity and horror of companies such as BetterHelp and Ellie Health and Growth Therapy, etc. These are not grounded in mental health at all, and soon AI will be an option. The best therapists are those who can form a connection with a client, using techniques that take years and extra training. Much to therapists' dismay, as it is lucrative, there is no quick fix, and a robot cannot help you. We're seeing it in social work too, which overlaps with the sense of clinical social workers. What used to distinguish clinical social workers from counselors, and at least in coursework still does, is the focus on systemic factors. Person-in-environment approach, and the interaction of systems in a client's life, family, neighborhood, political environment. Social work has also always had a distinctive focus on anti-oppressive and anti-racist practices, and social workers have been encouraged to also do macro work, community development, policy lobbying, community organizing, and activism. But now all that extra coursework is starting to go to waste because the only jobs that pay the bills, and sometimes even the only jobs available, are private practice or contract therapy jobs where we don't have any room to look at the system, or community-level solutions to mental health problems because they're not billable. We're locked into only individual psychotherapy, which depoliticizes social work practice when we know full well that individual therapy alone often blames clients and holds them responsible for conditions born of trauma, oppression, poverty, and exploitation, all of which our MSW prepares us to address, but fewer employers will allow us to do as government funding shrinks. Wealthy donors fear what they feel is radicalism, and services are increasingly put in the hands of private equity. It's almost impossible, for example, these days, to find a social work employer that will allow you to do violence prevention or community trauma work anymore.
What's one thing we did before the pandemic that even if the world went back to normal, you wouldn't do again? Go to work sick. Seconding this. If I'm ill, I'm either working from home or calling in. No more of this powering through nonsense. I don't know where I adopted the values of never calling off sick. Maybe because I couldn't find a job for a long time when I was younger. Clearly my workplace does not care about me, and it comes down to me thinking I'm screwing over coworkers, but that should be a management problem and not yours. Feeling bad about calling in. Getting hassled for calling in because you just have a cold, or being expected to recover from a cold in one day. My work still does that. I've had a really bad cold for over 2 weeks, and I've only been able to take a couple of those days off. Daily commute. Our company is committed to 3 days a week, max in the office. I've been in twice since the pandemic, and the colossal amount of wasted time really stunned me. It is very interesting to see how companies and cultures are different. I'm working with French and Germans. The French in Paris are back a minimum 3 days at the office, while the Germans have been so reluctant to return that the corporation is cutting office space due to lack of usage. Wow, I'd have assumed that it would be the opposite. Commute to work 1.5 hours each way, 5 days a week, so I can sit in my office and write emails and talk on the phone. The funny thing is, my home internet is at least twice as fast as the office. Why go there for a worse experience? My home internet is great now that I've upgraded my router, but the work VPN I need to use is slow as crap. At least now I can stream music without being bogged down by terrible office Wi-Fi. I still want no contact delivery to be an option. Just delivery of my groceries in general, instead of going to the supermarket, is something I plan to keep. It's convenient as hell. Some people can't pick produce for their life, but if that's all I have to go pick up myself, that's fine by me. I'm weird and actually really enjoy grocery shopping. Sometimes life gets in the way, and delivery can be a real lifesaver. Breathe down people's necks in the checkout lane. What magical place do you live in that this is no longer a regular occurrence? I'd like to live there also. Yes, the amount of times I'll turn around to leave the counter and I'll nearly bump into another customer. Treat my job title like it's my family name. Nah, I give you labor and you give me money. That's the extent of our relationship, and much like anyone trading time for money, others will pay me for my time. Not a chance I will ever again bleed, sweat, or cry for an employer. Never ever again. This is how I've always looked at it. We do a weird cultural thing in the US where we look at one's job as if it's their life. Nope, my job is the thing I do to pay for my life, and I don't wish to be at work one moment longer than required. Unfortunately, it isn't a cultural thing exclusively in the US. In most of Western Europe, the situation is very similar. Here in the Netherlands, our job is literally the main point in any conversation. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to your neighbors, someone you just met, family members, etc. Fake cough in public to hide the sound of passing gas. Now, we just pass gas to hide the cough. Did you just cough? No, I crapped my pants, I swear! Having a non-stop, out-all-day, go-go-go schedule. I understand now why I was constantly feeling frustrated. I was completely burnt out and had no me time. Now I don't make so many commitments to social events, work things, extra stuff, and I can't imagine ever stretching myself so thin again. For the life of me, I can't remember what seemed so important. Hell yeah, so many people still feel that way. It makes me sad seeing people feel like they have to go constantly. Nobody just chills anymore. Bras with wires in them. I've already made that commitment. I absolutely despise regular bras with straps that get twisted and dig into my shoulders. Now I wear exclusively sports bras or strapless bras, and I'm never going back. Bralettes are your friend. It's going to take a lot of money to convince me not to work from home anymore, right? Why do we need to sit in an office at work? I have an office at home. Don't these companies want to save money on their electricity, water, and leasing? What they've determined they really want is the ability to look over your shoulder from time to time and make sure you stay until exactly whatever time you get off. Won't necessarily say never, but bowling while eating finger foods seems like a really bad idea now. My friend just posted a pic on Facebook of a dude buying a convenience store hot dog. Well, he had the unprotected hot dog placed on the counter while paying, not even a little paper sleeve. Bun to counter. I don't understand humanity. That's like crapping with the toilet seat up. I honestly don't see the point in charging people to park at hospitals. I feel like people aren't coming here to have a grand old time. I personally don't go to hospitals for leisure. I think it's gross to charge people parking fees at hospitals when they're going through difficult times. Screw whoever thought of that crap. In addition to the other reasons supplied, if a hospital is in an area with other businesses nearby, charging for parking is a way to encourage the customers of restaurants, shops, etc. to not use hospital parking. The only hospital I've been to that charged for parking would validate tickets for patients so that they parked for free. Only non-patients had to pay. My SO works in a hospital that is located next to a bunch of businesses and high-rises, and I'm sure a lot of other people would use the hospital parking if there was no charge. Parking is validated for patients and their families. The hospital employees also park in the structure, so charging for parking helps ensure that they're able to make it to work on time. I think this is one of those issues that seems cold or heartless on the surface, but there are valid reasons for the policy when you really look into it. Accept people's invitations just because they invite me, not because I actually want to see them. Same, I was going to say my answer was see people. I've thrived in lockdown not having to subject myself to being social. Restaurants not doing carry-out. My two favorite local places outright refused to carry out until the pandemic hit. I really hope they don't end it. I love getting the food my wife and I enjoy, but being able to go home and eat it without a bunch of randos around. They will not end it. I have been in the restaurant industry for over a decade. The pandemic changed the way we do things in a lot of ways. Can you get them to turn down the music too? I'm here to have dinner and catch up with friends, not have my eardrums blasted. And yeah, I get the studies about how it encourages people to eat faster, equals higher turnover, equals more money or tips, but the end result is, I'd rather stay home instead. Curbside pickup. With kids, it has been great to not have to get them out or in the car for a quick pickup at the store. I assume this has been a blessing for those with disabilities who can drive, but still struggle getting out and into the car. On that note, more companies doing home delivery. Living in a small town and being disabled, my life has improved dramatically, with companies now doing delivery so that they can stay open. Now, if only work from home would take off in my country, I'd be able to work again. Unfortunately, the moment they could, most companies required people to get back into the office, and the disabled community had been so excited about working from home. Take a job that's not mostly or fully remote. Member of a team that is responsible for getting an entire college's faculty online when COVID hit. Months of Zoom training, LMS training, workshops on how to keep classes engaging, etc. March through August 2020 was the literal and absolute worst case scenario for my job. We pulled it off, proved it could be done, kept the faculty moving, and that our job could 100% be completed from home. June 2021, blanket statement, everyone must return to campus. Brought up to our boss about how we can do our job from home, as proven. Could we work out a work from home schedule, 2 to 3 days a week using 2 days to meet with faculty who may require face-to-face? Sorry, college order. With that, since June, we've lost 1/5 of our team, and another 1/3 of people in IT. Most of my faculty/committee meetings are still via Zoom. Faculty are hesitant to linger on campus, or just stop by the office, and 100% of my job is still taking place online. Long story short, yes, the age-old mentality of, if you're not here, you're not working, is a thought of the past, and I think those places who are clinging to it will find themselves short of talented individuals. To add on to showing up to work sick, I think the idea of powering through was taught to us in grade school. My school had an award for 0 days missed. This manipulated us to be good boys and girls to always show up. Not anymore. Perfect attendance awards are such trash. What a way to tell kids that it doesn't matter if they feel yucky, they should suck it up and get their classmates sick in the process. My job recently started giving an extra $25 a week for perfect attendance because they're desperate for people to stop calling out. Although I feel like more people are just going to come in sick now. Even if COVID disappeared overnight, I'd still want strangers and casual acquaintances to stay at least 6 feet away from me whenever possible. I mean, you could just come to Finland. I just did some calculations, and yes, that is more than 6 feet away. Birthday cake or candles? Here, I exhaled heavily on this. Please eat it. Cut the cake first, then blow out the candles on a single piece. Everybody gets a piece with a candle on it, and we all blow it out in unison while wishing for something good to happen to the birthday person in the next year. We'll probably keep ordering most groceries via curbside pickup. It's convenient and we spend less on stupid crap that we happen to walk past on the way to the milk aisle. We'll still go inside for stuff like produce though. The store employees just don't seem to pick the best fruit and vegetables. Also, the bakery is right next to the produce, and it's nice to pick up some stupid crap while you're shopping. OMG, I've totally noticed that regarding the produce too. I use Instacart to deliver my groceries, and I have gotten moldy or going bad raspberries every single time. And very rarely do I not have the same occurrence with strawberries. But when I go into the store, there are so many options of the ones that aren't going bad, so I don't get it. It's the difference between picking something you're going to put into a box and picking something you're going to eat. In other words, if I'm being paid to just put stuff into a box, I'm not going to spend much time looking at it. I'm going to grab whatever's on top and go. If I'm going to eat it, I'll look over a lot of raspberries before I find one that's acceptable. Commuting to work 5 days a week. Even those who can't work from home want work from home to stick around, because folks with jobs that require driving around major metropolitan areas were spoiled by the lack of traffic in 2020. I really hope as many office workers as possible can go back to work from home, because they're back on the roads now and are seemingly worse drivers than ever. Watch or read mainstream news. Negativity is more profitable than positivity. Oh yeah, it's almost been a year since I watched any news on the TV. Between the election and COVID, I had to quit that crap. Same, my father-in-law always badgers me about not staying up to date, but like, I get everything I need from the internet anyway. Overtime on salary. Pay me or go away. Left a salary job, for an hourly job. Nothing like putting my 8 hours in and calling it a day. Making less now, but that OT if needed and calming sense of 8 hours and hitting the old cosmic trail. I'll be avoiding big businesses, supermarkets, Amazon, restaurant chains, and multinationals. Don't know about you guys around the world, but the way the little businesses were treated here in France is sickening. Meanwhile, Bezos gets to swoop in and take everything. It stinks. Support local is a campaign here in Australia. Since our souring relations with China, there's a push for more Aussie-made products too. Great moves in my opinion. I'm a nurse. I love my job. Placing my job before my family and my good friends, done with every day, filling in for no-shows, existing on chimichangas and Death Wish coffees, 1 restroom break per shift, sleeping only 4 hours on work days, 14-hour shifts, sometimes 24 hours, only to sleep the day and nights away when off, being hit, bitten, groped, and cursed out. I've missed birthdays and graduations, missed out on a lot of living. These last 2 years really did me in. Tired of being sick and tired. I love my family and my physical and mental health more. At least now I do. More than ever before. Live and let live. What really annoyed me was the people saying essential workers are heroes but didn't do anything to help. Like just clapped for them and left. Overall, it was the realization of the lack of backing from the entities where we work, endure threats, and the lack of support placed many of us in harm's way, so many of us left the profession. For the ones who remain and have to function with less staff and resources, to care for the sick, our love and dedication to those that need us most are what keeps us going and working, even when our own health and safety are at risk. We will continue to advocate for safe and adequate working conditions on the behalf of the vulnerable, where it doesn't matter if there aren't enough health professionals to care for them. To our patients, it matters only that they get well enough to get home. That is what matters most to me, and to the doctors and nurses, the nursing assistants, every healthcare professional involved with patient care. Our dedication to wellness keeps us involved when all the odds are stacked against us. We keep pushing for wellness, for safety, or die trying. Work more than 40 hours a week. I used to put in 70 hours some weeks. While the money was good, I realized during the pandemic that I can survive with less and don't need to work myself to death. Live in a city for my job. I absolutely hated going remote for the first year. Emails were so much slower than just asking the guy sitting next to me. I missed making small talk and going out for lunch or company-sponsored events. I still don't like Zoom meetings, but I can tolerate them now. Now that I'm farther removed, I realized a lot of that was just something I was used to, instead of something I enjoyed. My rent is almost 50% lower now, and I'm only 10 miles from where I used to live downtown. I still have access to the city, and if they need us in quarterly, I can do a longer commute here and there. I'm not paying $200 a month for a parking spot. I get to live a quieter life in a quieter area, and when my significant other and I are ready, we'll be able to purchase a house pretty much anywhere we want. I'm the opposite. I don't miss the commute, but that is literally the only thing I don't miss about going into work. I really miss my coworkers and the sense of community that just hasn't been replaced. I never interact with people outside of my department, unless we're on projects together. Working from home definitely has its advantages, no doubt, but if it weren't for the 90-minute one-way commute, I'd be back in the office in a second. Work in open offices. They were waking nightmares for me even before, what with no privacy, routinely being a dull roar and requiring noise-canceling headphones to be able to think clearly, and I hate bosses watching me like buzzards eyeing a dying water buffalo. Now that I've worked remotely for years, including now for an absurdly well-known company, I ain't coming back to your dog crap open offices. I'll come back if you give me my own office. Oh, you won't give me one? And you want me in the office at least 2 days a week in Manhattan for your opportunity? Hard pass. Go into any public space while sick without a mask. If I have a cold and I have to nip to the drugstore for some cough syrup and a Kleenex, I am 100% gonna mask up. As a person with a severe immune deficiency, seeing people talk about this makes me so happy. Masking up when sick should absolutely be the new societal norm. Honestly, I have been getting a really comfortable and chic mask collection going. I'm going to keep fresh ones in a baggie in my purse even post-pandemic, if we ever get to a point of being post, or at least where contagion and death are much reduced. I plan to wear them during travel now, too, either way. Clubbing. Being charged to hang out in a room chock full of sweaty people while sweating your ass off yourself, while being charged an exorbitant amount for a watered-down alcoholic drink so that you can get wasted enough to actually enjoy the experience? I'll just stick to getting wasted with my friends, thanks. Yeah, I tried to go clubbing and thought it was lame as heck. Then again, I used to go to raves when I was a kid, so I guess that might have helped make clubs seem pretty crappy by comparison. Never too old to rave, my friend. My family stopped going to restaurants so much. We often went to McDonald's on the way home during our commute because we were hungry and tired. The pandemic stopped that. We didn't go to a restaurant or even order from a restaurant for many months. We started ordering food about 6 months in, and we still barely go to restaurants. We have saved so much money, it's crazy. I work part-time in a pizzeria as a dishwasher, and people are already going out and eating at restaurants more in my area. I think it's quite clear that the majority of people outside of Reddit want to go back and eat out at restaurants again. That's just from my experience. One of the first things I did when lockdown ended, but to me, it's about going for a treat once in a while to a nice restaurant. Good food, good wine, good friends. Even before the pandemic, it was clear eating at a McDonald's or pizza place multiple times a week wasn't good for you. Kissing people as a greeting. Never understood it, tried to avoid it, won't do it again. I used to attend a lot of conferences for my job. I'd sit in a booth and meet with clients and accounts for several days straight. I handled international accounts, and so I'd meet with clients from all around the world. And so the greetings would vary from handshakes to hugs to kisses on the cheek. And when I think about it now, through the lens of our current climate, it's insane to think about just how many germs we were all spreading to one another. I'm not a germ freak, and the reality is that given what I just noted above, it's not like people were constantly getting sick or anything due to the constant physical interactions with strangers. But it just does seem incredibly weird not, and I don't imagine I'll ever go back to that kind of comfort in greeting numerous amounts of people in that manner. Regular exposure to germs is generally good for you. Obviously, with COVID being a novel virus, it's different. Normally though, it's better to be exposing yourself because otherwise your immune system can forget how to fight those other things. It's better for your immune system to be prepared in the eventual case that you are exposed to some lower level virus or bacteria. As a teacher, have kids turn in physical copies of work. Every student has a laptop or Chromebook now due to the remote learning, and it's going to stay that way. So everything is turned in digitally. It's so nice being able to just upload the work I want them to do without having to bother making copies and hope that the machines aren't down, and I just grade everything on the computer. No more having kids tell me they handed me an assignment and accusing me of losing it. I can just check to see if they submitted it or not. It makes my life so much easier and it saves a ton of paper. But the dog ate my laptop. The nightlife. This pandemic has made me love staying home on a Friday night and not doing anything. No obligations to hang out with friends, no more FOMO. Just me alone gaming all night and waking up the next day with no hangover. I don't know why everyone has such a problem with socializing. Like, we humans need socialization. I go crazy with cabin fever if I stay cooped up with no one but my cat all day. I understand having a lot of social obligations, but I need to hang out with some friends at least once a week. Different strokes for different folks. Some people feel emotionally recharged after being social, others do not. To claim one is better than another is just foolish. Rush into work. If I'm late, I'm late. I'm not being paid, so I'm at least gonna enjoy myself. Yeah, if I'm late to work more than 15 minutes, which is the amount of time you're allowed to be late without getting written up, I just go ahead and make it an hour or two. No reason to rush, especially if I'm gonna be written up anyway. I've never understood this American concept of being written up at work. It's not school, you've not been naughty, they're not going to write a note to your mom. If you do good work, who cares if you're a few minutes late here and there? If you're really late all the time, or other more serious infractions, well then you have a serious conversation with your manager and get laid off if things don't improve. My mask is staying with me forever now. I haven't been sick once since the pandemic started, and I plan to keep it that way. Yeah, I remember when I caught the flu years back, and it was brutal for 3 weeks, and then came back a few weeks after. Never again. I never want or need to be on public transportation without my mask, and I honestly don't mind wearing it. I forget it's even on me when I leave work sometimes, and it keeps my nose warm outside in the cold weather. There's a lot of people I don't care to talk to no more. Responded terribly to all of this and acted so selfish. I don't need that in my life. Bye. And no, just because you are family does not give you some automatic claim on my time or energy, nor does it authorize you to pass judgment on me or my choices. Blood relation doesn't mean crap to me anymore. Space in my tribe is earned. Damn, I'm jealous of all the people who can work from home, since that seems to be the main answer here. I ain't got that option. I can't either, but during the lockdown, there was no one on the road. It was glorious. I hope as many people work from home as possible for as long as possible. Eat at a buffet. You can give me sneeze guards, face masks, hand sanitizer, and food handler gloves, and I will still pass it up. I loved all-you-can-eat buffets. A sushi place in a nearby town, nearby meaning only an hour away, has solved this problem beautifully. You go into the restaurant and you've got an iPad at the table. The iPad has an app with all the buffet stuff on it. Select what you want and send the order, and fresh stuff is delivered to your table. Take public transportation maskless. Now, just the thought of it makes me disgusted. It's funny because years ago, I thought that people in Asia were very odd for wearing masks in public. Now I realize how ignorant we were. I always saw it and thought, well, I guess you do you. When I learned why, I realized how thoughtful it was. For people whose marriage lasted less than a year, what went wrong? We expedited the marriage because she was pregnant, and I loved her already, so wasn't concerned about it. I was working crazy hours so that she could stay home with the baby, and our schedule started shifting, so we didn't spend as much time together. She had postpartum and started playing online role-playing games all night and met a guy who didn't work and lived off of his mother, so he had all the time to talk to her. Long story short, she kissed our daughter, gave her to me, and ran off with him. Fast forward over a decade and we're fine as friends now, and my daughter is cuddled up beside me as I type this, playing on her tablet. The karma is time and lifestyle haven't been kind to her, and our daughter would rather be with me and trust me more. Good for you. Being a badass single dad. Did you just assume that he is single? I'm sure someone has snapped him up quick. College roommate. He met a girl junior year that our entire group thought was wrong for him. But love is blind. Fast forward to summer after graduation and they are to get married in the fall. I'm at the wedding. They were apart for most of the summer, and he was working, and she was finishing school and putting the wedding together. We converge on her hometown in Colorado. The wedding goes down, big reception, lots of money dropped on this one. We see them off on the honeymoon, and I return to St. Louis to home sweet home. 7 days later, I get a call from him asking if he can come stay with me. Sure. I pick him up at the airport, single. At his insistence, we hit the nearest bar, and I get to hear all about how she cheated on him over the summer, but went ahead with the marriage because she felt pressured by how much her parents were paying. She told him pretty much as soon as they were alone, after the ceremony. Not at any time during the 7 to 10 days. They were together before the wedding. She insists that they go on the honeymoon to work things out, but refuses to be intimate as she still has feelings for the other guy, so he never returns to her. Gets checked for all the STDs, negative, and has the marriage annulled within 6 months. Belinda, screw you for what you did to my friend. Yeah, screw Belinda. My mom's marriage to her first husband was only a year and a half at the most. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he said that he wanted to marry her before he died. So they got married and took a honeymoon to Hawaii, because he'd always wanted to go there too. Aw, this is the saddest story here. Sad, but in a way, also happier than the other stories here. She had another boyfriend when I proposed, and kept him around while planning our wedding. They got married after our divorce. Don't get married while you're in the military. Listen to the signs. I'm sorry that you went through that and had a see you next Tuesday of a wife. I am 36 years old and just learned the see you next Tuesday insult a couple of months ago. My absolute new favorite insult. I wish I could have learned about it years ago. This one kind of screwed up. Happened to a friend. We were deployed in Okinawa. My friend married his girl prior to deployment. He found out mid-deployment that she cheated on him, but the way he found out was kind of messed up. He checked his Facebook one day and saw a message from some dude he didn't know. The guy straight up told him that he slept with his wife. She didn't say she was married, and when he checked her Facebook, he saw that she was married to my friend. He felt guilty and had to message him. My friend wasted no time and divorced her in Okinawa. I'm not sure if that was possible. I just remember him doing some kind of legal work the following day. Good on the guy for telling him though. Some would just want to avoid that situation and let further harm be done. I'm a girl, but I kinda was in that situation. Not within a marriage because we're all pretty much still teens or in our early 20s. Slept with a guy who was doing a year abroad. He was from Spain. A few times. All good fun. He told me he was single and not looking for something romantic right now. Suddenly, a friend of his, met the guy at a party, told me that the guy had a pretty much long-term girlfriend back home. I was mad to say the least, told him to leave and never had contact with him again. I wish I could have told his girlfriend, but I don't know her name, don't have his Facebook, and don't even speak Spanish. I hope she finds out somehow though, because I'm sure as hell likely not the only girl he slept with. Some people, man. My cousin was married for 18 hours, or something ridiculous like that. To hear her tell it, there was a really apocalyptic argument on their wedding night over where they went from there. The moral of the story appears to be that before you get married, you and your spouse should have roughly compatible ideas of what you're looking for out of a marriage. How many kids, when to have them, where you live, whether you both work, money issues, etc. That's not stuff that just works itself out magically over time. I pictured them driving in the car after their wedding ceremony, wondering where to go next, and then breaking up. I know someone that basically had this happen. As they were driving home from the wedding, they had lived together for 2 years. She burst into tears and said that she never wanted to get married. He drove her to her parents, and they had the marriage annulled. Husband decided to start an affair within 3 months of marriage. Found about 6 months after. Still maintains there was nothing wrong. Just thought it would have been over before I found out. Oh, and our baby was only 6 months old. What a catch of a man who started divorce proceedings after waiting the year minimum. What is a year minimum? There can be a year requirement of separation before you can be legally divorced. In my parents' case, they had to live apart for an entire year and testify under oath that they had not spent a single night under the same roof in that year period. Apparently in Maryland, that's the rule, and if they had spent a single night in the same house, the year waiting period would have had to start over. Such stupid crap. They were allowed to get married too young. Why weren't they allowed to divorce when they were old enough to realize it was time to move on? Obviously, I'm still salty about my parents' divorce. Mine lasted just a little over a year, but close enough. Married my girlfriend of 4 years right before getting deployed. She didn't have anything to keep herself busy while I was gone. Job, hobby, etc. Ended up getting into drugs while I was gone, and then I got her pregnant during my 2 weeks leave in the middle of the deployment. She felt so trapped that she had talked me into agreeing to give our child up for adoption once she was born. I was so blindly in love with her that I would have agreed to darn near anything she suggested. She ended up leaving me a week after our daughter was born and canceling the adoption, taking her back from the adopting parents. Long story cut short, she got back into drugs, pretty sure she wasn't on them while pregnant with my daughter, had 2 more kids with whoever was her dealer at the time, and CPS ended up stepping in, which gave me full custody of my daughter. Not a day goes by when I look at my daughter and wonder what the heck I was thinking, and I'm so glad to have this wonderful, crazy little girl in my life. I feel for you and your daughter, and I'm glad you two have each other. She started feeling trapped, as in my expectation of monogamy was too much, so she discovered polyamory, decided she wanted to be polyamorous with her boss, and that it was worth opening the marriage no matter what. She was pretty surprised when I divorced her. She was using poly as an excuse to throw responsibility back on you for not being open-minded or supportive enough, convenient cover for what used to be called cheating, promiscuity, or being a whore. There's some evidence that she may actually be poly, and I'm 96% sure she didn't physically cheat on me. Emotionally, yes. I think she put off examining her feelings about monogamy, me, and not knowing how to handle attraction to other guys till after the wedding, when it all came crashing down. She's kind of trash, but not malicious. Nothing really went wrong. Nothing really went at all. We had been dating for 7 years, so we thought it was a safe bet. Realized a year into our marriage that we were better as separate people, and it sucked. There were a ton of tears, a whole lot of begging not to let it end, a whole bunch of trying new things, living separately, splitting the money, etc., so that we could be apart together, but it just didn't work. We were just live-in friends when it came down to it, and I think, too, that if we hadn't gotten married, we never would have seen it. It was sort of the impetus for us both to move on. As crappy as that might sound, it was a shakeup in our otherwise completely humdrum stable life, and it ended up working out for the best, but it sucked for a long time. That spark isn't permanent with new relationships. That's why so many people end up getting bored and marriage is considered hard. The important thing is finding an SO that you enjoy being around and having fun with, a best friend. That way when the spark fades, you are not stuck with the starfish who sits on the couch and eats Cheetos all day. Marry your best friend, not a girl that you have the hots for. If you expect to find a relationship where the spark never fades, you'll be very disappointed. The spark leaves even when you have been dating for more than a year, but the fun doesn't end. It just isn't entirely sexual anymore. A friend of mine bought a house in a small town with his new wife, and he continued to commute 1 hour each way to work in our city. She worked part-time in the small town. Around the 10-month mark of their marriage, she cheated on him with a mechanic in that small town. That was 5 years ago, and she's still with the mechanic, but he won't commit. Geez, I wonder why. Maybe she likes dogs and he likes cats. My ex-wife and I lasted about 7 years, but her first marriage ended pretty much right at the year mark. They were both 19, she got pregnant, they got married, and tried to make their life work on one $8 an hour income, with her as a stay-at-home mom with no money, no car, and no friends in the same place in life she was. Day in and day out stress drove them apart. Same for me and my wife. In our first 2 years of living together, I was making about $9 to $10 an hour, and she didn't work. I was always broke and was financially challenged. One day we talked it over and I decided to just give my entire paycheck to her and she would pay bills and budget my lunches and everything. All of a sudden, we were on our way out of her mom's house and into an apartment with cable and internet and a car and cell phones. She freaking rocked at budgeting. Been together for 9 years now. That's badass. I hope you have told her how you feel because I'm sure she would love to hear it. I was married for slightly more than a year. We were high school sweethearts and literally got married right after high school. Our whole marriage was plagued with terrible life events. We moved closer to her college but had to move back due to finances, and right at this time my grandmother died. We were pretty poor after moving back home, but we managed for a while. Things were even looking nice. We had moved out of my mom's house and had our own apartment again. We were working, had money, and were enjoying our time together. I got deathly ill, and this put me out of work. With medical bills and rent, we were back to struggling. I had a lot of mental issues, like anxiety and depression at the time as well, and so did she. She started to get really close to a coworker while I was out of work too. They're dating now. I moved out in November of 2015. We were married in July of 2014. We were officially divorced in April last year. We haven't talked much since, and it's still difficult sometimes to think about, but I've gotten much better over the past few months. Hang in there, dude. I have no idea how it must feel, but it will get better. What went wrong? Does being stupid count? We had been dating for about 3 years, got to a crossroads. Both of us finished school. I was thinking about what job offer I wanted to accept and where I'd have to move. He was having a major freakout about not being together, so he convinced me to get married. It wasn't that hard. I was apprehensive about moving to a strange town, and marriage seemed like a better idea. After marriage, I went to work. He decided he wanted another degree. Okay. Then about 6 months into his new studies, he gets recruited for a job 1,000 miles away. He took the job without telling me, but we pack up and move. Now he's working and I'm working, but he's working at a job he's really excited about, and I'm working at a crappy low-paying job because it's the only thing I can find. Then he gets headhunted by another company. We move again. And now we are living in a rented trailer because it's the only thing we can find on short notice. He's working 12-hour days, and I'm stuck at home. No job, no car, no friends. Truthfully, I wasn't the best of marriage partners. I'm going crazy, stuck at home all day with no car and no company except the TV. When he does come home after working a 12-hour day, he's exhausted. I'm giving him crap about not getting out of the house ever. He starts hanging out with his work friends, probably to avoid me. He starts cheating with the women at work. No idea how many other women there were, but I know of at least 2. I know about these women because by now I've started to develop a circle of friends, mostly wives of the people he works with. They tell me. When I confronted him, he told me that he just didn't realize how hard marriage would be. I took the car and drove home, left him in that crappy trailer with no car. Some months later, he asks me to file for divorce. I told him no way. He screwed it up. He could file and explain the grounds to his attorney and the judge. He sent me the divorce papers in the mail. He did call me about 10 years later and apologized for being such an asshole, but really, it wasn't all him. So he forced you to keep moving without ever consulting you and then worked 12 hours a day, aka you basically never got a chance to see each other? It does indeed sound to me like he screwed it up. After spending a year together, we got married so that he wouldn't get deported. I took care of him, paid all the bills, and paid to sponsor him. Turns out he was already married in his own country. Yep. Took me a while to stop being bitter over the thousands of dollars I got conned out of. My dad had recently died, and I suppose he saw me like a lion sees a wounded gazelle. I briefly dated a guy who said he was separated from his wife. Well, technically, he wasn't lying. I mean, she was in another country while he was here. I found out that they weren't actually separated when he asked me to be quiet while he was on a phone call with her and his kids back home. The day after the wedding, a sheriff showed up on our doorstep with child support papers for a 3-month-old baby. Turns out he had been sleeping with one of his coworkers. I was willing to look past the indiscretion, but when he refused to take responsibility for his child, I couldn't handle it anymore. The kid shouldn't have to suffer because his dad is an idiot. Divorce was final 11 months after our wedding day. A buddy of mine found out the night before the wedding his soon-to-be wife slept with her ex. He goes through with it, and as the vicar ends the ceremony, he tells all, in front of everyone, throws the ring away and asks the vicar if he does take-backs. Groom: "Do you by any chance do take-backs?" Vicar: "Yeah, no problem. You may unkiss the bride." Though it didn't happen to me, a friend of mine got married to a woman he had been with for a long time. They had children and a home together as well. The relationship was failing, and they both thought that finally getting married would save it. Spoiler alert, it did not. Love the spoiler alert at the end. 10 out of 10 would read that comment again. I went to school with a girl who got married in July of 2016 after 3 months of dating a guy. They got divorced in November of 2016 after the presidential election. Turns out one of them was an extreme conservative while the other was an extreme liberal, and this was not discovered until then. How does that not come up? Something tells me their relationship was 80% sex and 20% Netflix, with very little chit-chat in between episodes. Got married after 5 months. He wanted to move to Washington and virtually forced me to do it, since I didn't want to. Quit my job and house and stayed at a hotel for a couple of days. The day before moving, he said he fell out of love and would go on without me. Left me heartbroken, homeless, and jobless. Bonus: he didn't move to Washington. He's in Davenport, Florida, around 10 minutes away, and got a boyfriend about a day after leaving me. Are you a man, or did he come out as gay? I'm a guy. We were together for 6 years, pretty young, 19 at the beginning. Her mental health slowly declined as we were together, but I loved her all the same. She eventually was diagnosed with bipolar 2 and went through massive mood swings. Eventually, I became resentful and started to look for companionship elsewhere. I regret it more than anyone could ever imagine. She caught me and accused me of having a relationship with multiple other people. I eventually asked for an annulment after 8 months of marriage around Christmas. I'm not sure I could have made any more bad decisions than I did. She moved away to be with her father, as he is 90 years old. I miss her every day. Not I, a girlfriend of mine, had a high school sweetheart. I think he was diagnosed with bone marrow cancer after they were pregnant. Either way, it had progressed and decided to amputate his arm. Didn't get all the cells and so had to amputate up to his shoulder. Still didn't work and had it spread to his chest months before their wedding. Not sure how long they were engaged, but his mom confronted her and gave her the blessing that she is under no obligation to marry her son. My friend remained vigilant, still married him, and he passed away less than 2 weeks later in their home. I've never cried more at a funeral, especially watching their not even 2-year-old daughter running around the funeral smiling and waving at everyone. He was only 24 or 25 years old. Not me, but my sister-in-law. She dated a guy who had 1 ball and low T. They get married, but he's cheating on her the whole time. No idea how with 1 nut and low T. Maybe it was the androgel. Anyway, we go out to eat on a double date in Old City, and my wife decides to get a tattoo. So she gets a little 26.2 on her hip, marathon. My wife's sister tells her husband to get her name. He says no. She freaks out. Now granted, I'm all for realizing we don't know the future, and it's not wise to get someone's name, but this is getting good. So my wife asks me if I would get her name. I said, "Of course, honey. I would get your name across my throat." Sister looks at her husband, he hangs his head and gets her name across the inside of his bicep. Huge. He gets caught cheating like a week later and she divorces him within the week. I was 1 year out of a 12-year marriage to a woman who was more than a little crazy. I had custody of our 3 kids and I met a woman. She was really nice and we were talking about marriage after a short while. I tried to insist that we wait a year, and at first she agreed, but she had 100 reasons why we should get married sooner. I relented and we got married after 4 months. Within 2 months, she assured me she had made a big mistake and I had to keep talking her out of quitting. I thought things were getting better, but 3 days after Christmas, she told me that she bought a house and would be leaving in 3 weeks. Oh, and by the way, could she stay until the closing? We had been married 5 months when she left and 10 months when the divorce was final. She moved about 40 miles away. I saw her a few times before she moved out west. Oddly, after moving out west, she started calling me asking to come back. I told her I was open to starting over from scratch, but I was not open to immediately moving back together. That wasn't what she wanted, and she kept asking me for a year. One day the calls stopped, and eventually I heard that she had met someone else and gotten married. I don't hate her, though I do hate what she did to my kids. Their mother was unreliable, and the day I had to tell them that another woman in their life could not be counted on was the worst day of my life. My SO's brother is in the Marines and got stationed in California. Rushed a marriage without a ceremony for the benefits. Didn't even bother telling his family, which is across the country, until after. He also ran up a bunch of debt fixing his truck and then breaking it at the next weekend off-roading. The relationship was immediately a crap show, and not even 6 months in, he's been caught answering ads. He's also done a complete 180 personality change and is treating his family like crap. They flew across the country to see him and meet his wife for the first time. He would only meet them for lunch at Panera one day. He's also told them to not talk to him unless it's something important. If they make it past a year, I'll be amazed. It's almost like once a week he asks himself, how can I make my life worse? And then answers his own question by doing it. We married too young, and when she wouldn't stop smoking in the house, I put her cigarette and her out with a fire extinguisher one day while she was sitting on the couch. Never got married, but dated a girl for a few years. Talked about marriage all the time. We were a great couple, and one day she admits she couldn't actually marry me because she truly hated my last name. I've had 3. First, my wife turned out to be a lesbian, but who could see that coming? Then I met this really cool British girl. We hit it off from day one, and I thought I loved her. Only at the altar I said another woman's name. She hated me, and of course that didn't work out. Next, I went to Vegas with a couple of my friends to see our other friend who had an acting gig up there. Well, I got blackout wasted and ended up marrying her in a chapel up there. My bad. Found Ross. What happened to make you say, I'm never coming to this restaurant again? We got home and realized neither of us had paid the bill. I ordered food in the drive-thru of a Wendy's once. It was a relatively large order as it came to $25 or so. When I got to the window to pay, I was greeted by a worker that ignored the debit card I had in my hand and handed me my drinks, which caused me to put my debit card down in order to grab them. Then another employee gets to the window and hands me both bags of food before closing the window. Then another employee comes to the window to hand me the dipping sauces for the chicken nuggets, and I go to hand him my debit card and he waved me away. I sat there bewildered for a second, wondering if I actually paid or not, when he waved at me to leave again because I was holding up the line. When I got home, I was curious and checked my bank account, and there was no charge from Wendy's. I avoided that place for a few weeks before I returned, and nobody mentioned a thing, though I do blame the confusion on the fact that 3 different people served me from the drive-thru window and probably assumed I paid the first person that helped me. Did you pass the first window and drive up to the second? My wife is celiac, so really intense real gluten allergy. We get a gluten-free menu. It lists chicken and waffles. She orders it, takes a few bites, comments that it's the best gluten-free waffle that she's ever tasted, starts to feel sick, asks the waiter, "Oh, the waffle isn't gluten-free, just the chicken." I've had a few like that too. "Oh, there's only a little gluten in it." I worked at this place for one day. It was a deli-type place. I had 5 years of kitchen experience and needed the work in a small town. Within 5 minutes, I was questioning their sanitary disposition, with unregulated temperatures, improper disposal methods, and general disregard for cleanliness. After a half hour, I told myself I needed the money, could look past it and do my best to make improvements over time. Then came the French fry that broke the camel's back. Their fryer, they dumped a basket of fries in it, but when it came out, it had a brown film or sludge over the delicious crispy fried potato product. I asked if they were going to serve that to the customer, and they said yes, it's the gravy. After further questioning, I found out they inherited the property and the oil hasn't been changed in 7 years. After 45 minutes of working there, I quit and called the health inspector. I never looked back. Haha, the gravy, Jesus Christ. Went to a local Mexican place and got a burrito. Took a bite and found a piece of glass. Did you ask for no glass? I mean, probably not. Can I get 2 soft tacos, no glass, a hard taco, no glass, and no tomatoes, and a burrito? Bites into the burrito. Crap, I forgot to say no glass on the last one. The little brownie mix package was baked into the goddamn brownie. Oh, that? It's just a little extra flavoring. Really helps improve the texture. All our customers love it. At least the ones who don't choke on it and die. During college, I caught the Chinese food restaurant's employees sneezing on the food. They saw me see it from far away and walked into the back, told everyone I knew. I had a similar experience at a Chinese restaurant near where I used to live. Went to pick up my order and a kid of one of the employees was walking around behind the counter coughing without covering his mouth. I should have told them to cancel my order and left, but was feeling non-confrontational. I used to go to a diner all the time that was owned by a guy who was a friend of my parents. From when I was around 10 or so, I would stop there on my way to school almost daily and get breakfast. Usually just cereal or some toast, sometimes eggs. As my parents both worked early and wouldn't be home. Never paid a dime either. On weekends, I would usually go there with my parents and get a full fry-up. Eggs, bacon, sausage, hash browns, ham, the works. The food was incredible. I had a huge crush on one of the waitresses. She would always be working the mornings and would talk to me and be super friendly and call me sweetie or honey, and I'd always look forward to seeing her. I'm sure she knew it too. She was gorgeous. Or at least she was to 10-year-old me. Anyway, we moved, and one of my last thoughts as we were leaving that town were, I'm never going to that restaurant again. Hey, it's me, the waitress. 3 eggs sunny side up, side of bacon, whole wheat toast, extra toasty, extra butter, thanks. We went to the Old Country Buffet a long time ago, and my dad got a hot dog that turned out to be moldy. We haven't gone back. The restaurant name checks out. Mexican restaurant I had never been to before. My 2 friends go in and wait for a while by the door while being stared at by staff. Eventually we sat. A boy no older than 10 years old greeted us after a minute, and I asked for water. He said they didn't have water. They didn't have water. They didn't have water. They didn't have water. Clearly the problem was you should have asked for agua. It's a Mexican restaurant after all. You joke, but I went to a local Chinese restaurant, your typical family-owned place, and had lunch a few years back. The waiter clearly didn't have a firm grasp of English, and at the end of the meal, I asked for the check. He took my glass, went to the soda fountain in the back, and stared at it for a good minute. Apparently he thought check was a type of soda. The owner finally came out from the kitchen, asked him what he was doing in Mandarin, and started laughing. Found a bunch of eaten chicken wing bones in my appetizer basket. They just dropped a new piece of paper over them and filled it up with onion rings. Pointed it out to the manager, declined to get my app for free, and walked out. I would have contacted the health department after crap like that. It's a massive health hazard. And I can't help but wonder if they're too lazy to wad up the last app's liner and trash it, what else are they cutting corners on? I'm sure that some stoned line cook just didn't do his job, but that's why I walked out. If they mess up cleaning a basket, I've got no faith in their salad or entree liners either. Local breakfast place in my hometown that I went to as a kid. Ordered a Belgian waffle, and it comes out dark brown and crunchy. I complained that it was burned, and they sent it back to make a new one. About 5 minutes later, they returned with a new waffle, except it wasn't new. It had bite marks, right where I had bitten it. And hey, the section I bit out had butter on it. They walked it back in and turned the waffle over, thinking no one would notice. When I was 3, my parents and I were at a Pizza Hut, and when the waiter brought us our drinks, he spilled them all over me. All 3 of us got popped, so I was sticky. This in itself wasn't too bad, but when my parents got the check, they realized that they had charged for 2 sets of drinks, including the ones that were spilled on me. When my dad asked the waiter about this, he said it was only fair. This is the only time I've ever seen my dad not tip. I can imagine the waiter's reasoning behind that. Like, well, you technically still got them, you just didn't drink them. Yeah, honestly, it's your fault for not specifying in what manner you'd like your drink. It was our favorite bar. We used to live down the road from it. We had our first date there and knew every employee, even the cooks in the back. We moved about 25 minutes away. We got engaged and needed to save money. We went for the first time in months. The menu changed drastically. The management changed, and almost none of the servers recognized us, as most staff had left. We tried to give it a go, but the food was awful. They'd even changed cooks. We realized what we had was gone. You killed the bar! There was a small fly, a fruit fly, I think, in my fried egg. It was all fried and crispy. I wasn't even that bothered. I'm not a confrontational person. I didn't even want a whole new meal, I just wanted a new egg. The waitress came back from the kitchen and said that the chef was insisting it was a bit of herb that he uses in his cooking. You could see the legs and wings. They were so insistent that I could see it wasn't worth arguing. They were a new business as well, so you would have thought that they would want to establish a customer base. You must have read the menu wrong. Must have said, fried egg. Ah, the old English delicacy. They lost a lawsuit over stealing the server's tips. Best pancakes and stuffed French toast, breakfast skillets of my life. But I couldn't do it after that. Sophia's? Nailed it. A family-owned restaurant didn't honor a 3-week in advance reservation for Valentine's Day, but instead overbooked and didn't seat us until an hour later, then proceeded to give us silverware and asked us for drinks 20 minutes after that. We just said not to bother and left. My Valentine's nightmare. My fiancé and I went to a popular locally owned seafood restaurant. Because we knew it would get packed, we arrived pretty early. I ordered a rum and coke and my partner ordered a Sprite because he was driving. The waitress brought me a rum and coke, but brought partner a 7 and 7. We explained the mistake to the waitress and told her not to worry about it. I would drink the 7 and 7, and to please bring a Sprite. When she brought our meals, she brought me the wrong meal. She apologized and I assumed went to reorder my meal. I ordered crab legs. 20 minutes go by and my partner is finished eating and we are just waiting. The waitress never returned to our table. She didn't come to refill his Sprite or tell me my food was on its way. Nothing. I finally said this is crazy and flagged her down and asked her to please cancel my order and get us our check. I explained that we would pay for all of the drinks and the food that my partner ate, but I wasn't paying for the food that I ordered and never received. About 5 minutes later, she comes back to our table crying her eyes out. I mean really sobbing. Her manager told her that she had to pay for our meal. My partner told her, no, we will pay for what we ate and drank. Please go get your manager. The manager comes to our table with my food. At this point, I'm not eating. I just want to get out of there. I decline the food and ask again for our bill. The manager storms off with the plate of food. He comes back. We are on the second floor of the restaurant and just stands on the other side of the room. The waitress is waiting on customers but still sniffling. My partner walks up to the manager and asks again for our bill. Tells him that we don't want the waitress to pay for our food and drinks, and that we don't have any problem paying our bills. The manager then starts loudly yelling at him. Mind you, this is in an area with many other diners. Told him that we planned this and did this on purpose to get a free meal out of them. My partner is a big dude and doesn't take crap off of anyone, but I was proud of him. He just turned around and we left. I'm sure that poor waitress ended up paying for our food and drinks, but they wouldn't give us the bill. I ended up eating peanut butter and jelly for dinner that night. Isn't it illegal to hold waitresses liable for the bill? I mean, first they don't even pay these people minimum wage, and they expect them to foot a bill? Frick them. We were completely ignored. It was a small, family-owned Mexican restaurant that was extremely popular. We had been there many times. We were the only people sitting in one of the waitress's sections. We watched her as she stood there, talking to the busboys and cooks in plain view of our table. We had to walk up to her to ask her to take our order and to go up again to ask for another margarita. We then had to go up and ask for the check. It was the only time I didn't leave a tip. I have no idea what we did to her. The other waitress in a different section was actually doing her job, and she had a full section. The only thing I can think of is that it was the end of her shift and she didn't care. Oh, no, don't just leave no tip. Then they just think that you don't believe in tipping. You have to leave the smallest possible form of currency your country has to get the message through. I feel morally obliged to give waiters and waitresses tips, but I need to get across the fact that you don't deserve anything, tip. I used to go to a local Mexican restaurant so much that I knew the workers by name, and they knew me by name. I went with my friend and she was being super flirty and made a deal with the waiter that she would go on a date for a free drink. When we left, she said she wasn't going on that date. I can never return to that restaurant. There's only one thing you can do. Make up for the dishonor by going on a date with the waiter yourself. Yeah, but you gotta dress up like your female friend, so it's like those old 80s sitcoms where they do the switch-em-ups and miraculously the dude doesn't notice that it's just a wig. There is a little cafe in my town that I would frequent about twice a month. I went there a couple of months ago and asked to place a to-go order. The waitress told me to wait to see if they could still take orders. This was at like 6:30 p.m., so no reason why they wouldn't be taking orders. She's gone for like 15 minutes, comes back and says that they aren't taking any more orders for the night. As she's saying this, a couple comes in and sits down. She proceeds to give them a menu and asks to take their order. I just said, "You have to be freaking kidding me. I'm never coming back here again," and stormed out. I'd be talking to a manager or the owner if that happened. That's probably the waitress pulling that crap. Time for her to move on. That's a really nice way to say, time to get her ass fired. The nozzle fell off the soda fountain and bug parts fell out into my cup. Roaches and other bugs in the soda fountain are a common problem if you don't clean it properly. I told a worker and they just screwed the nozzle back on when they thought I wasn't looking. Who knows what else they weren't cleaning? When I was younger, I worked at a small cafe place. We religiously cleaned the soda dispenser caps nightly. Wash, rinse, sanitize, and wipe down the machine itself as well. I never understood why we did this, and since we did it every night, it was always clean, so I never knew that they could get as dirty as they do. Yep, I was the manager of a local pizza place, and the soda machine is one of those things that you have to take good care of because they will attract bugs. And the ice machine is a recipe for disaster. Every night the caps had to be taken off and put into a bucket of sanitizer overnight, and then thoroughly wiped down. We emptied the ice machine completely twice a week, and turned it off to be turned on in the morning. You can't be lazy with soda machines, and I can tell you it's one of the best ways to tell if a place is cleanly. I was at a macaroni grill, felt something on my leg, and then swatted at my jeans. Went to the bathroom and found nothing, but returned and saw that there was a crushed roach under the table. Basically, I had crushed it against my jeans, and it had fallen out of my jeans afterwards. Told the waitress who just offered a free dessert. Really wasn't angry. We just joked about it, but afterwards I avoided that location. I was at a Taco Bell in a food court. I very rarely eat there, but was in the mood for some reason. After I place my order and I'm pulling out my card to pay, I notice a roach crawling up the wall next to the cashier. I was just so shocked that all I could do was say, "Never mind," and walked away. Haven't been back there since and never will. I kept meaning to report them but kept forgetting. Still feel bad about not reporting them. I have worked in many restaurants. Every single one has had 1 or 2 cockroaches at some point in time. Usually happens after heavy rain, sometimes for no reason at all. Do not assume a restaurant isn't a safe place to eat or is dirty because a bug shows up, but do tell the staff. Most restaurants are sprayed and checked for pests monthly. It annoys me how many people are overreacting in this thread. I went to Ruby Tuesdays once and there was a partially frozen entire stick of butter on my steak. You passed up some butter steak? I prefer milk steak. I booked a table for 7 people at an Indian restaurant. I had this confirmed by email and the manager even called me a few hours before to remind me and let me know that they were looking forward to hosting us. I arrive at the restaurant and the manager is nowhere to be seen. The staff tell me there is no booking and even suggest I book over the road. I show them my phone log and they say it's definitely not their phone number. They begin trying to usher us towards the exit. I start thinking I messed up big time and freak out I've screwed up organizing a get-together for my best friend who is moving away. I decide to call the number that had phoned me earlier. Then the restaurant telephone right next to us starts to ring. The guy who said I had no booking picks up. He notices it's me, but decides to pretend he thinks I'm another customer calling in. It feels like a scene from Fawlty Towers. I am on the phone with him and standing right next to him. "Hello, I'm standing beside you. I have a booking. I've got an email confirmation and you also called me today. You just pretended this wasn't your number and now you've answered it right in front of me. I'm pretty sure I'm not booked over the road, but I wish I was." Don't leave us hanging. What happened next? Went to a new restaurant with my family, right near the house, so hopefully it can be a new commonplace. Plus I'd heard the wings were fantastic. So we go in. Takes a while for us to have someone come to take our drink orders, so oh well. My dad ordered a sandwich and a cup of soup. Now, if you order soup, do you not expect it to come before the entree? Well, we get our entrees. Side note, the wings weren't great, but my dad didn't get his soup, so he tells the waitress and she says she'll go get it, but he says never mind because he has his entree. So we eat. The food was okay, nothing to rave about. We get the check and notice that the soup is on it. We ask the waitress why it's on there and she says it's because we ordered it. Well, we didn't eat it, so no reason we should pay for it. Asked to speak to the manager. Now, a $3 cup of soup isn't a big deal, but it's the principle of it. The manager speaks to us. We say we shouldn't need to pay for it because we didn't eat it. He disagrees. We ordered it and therefore we should pay for it. Long story short, we end up telling him to go screw himself and that he doesn't want our type eating there anyways. Still not sure in what way he meant that. Jewish? New Yorkers? A month or 2 later, they're shut down. Was eating at a Chinese restaurant where you order rice by the bowl. From the angle I was sitting, I saw the waiters taking half uneaten bowls of rice and dumping them back into the rice cooker. My uncle has a story like this. High school job working as a busboy in a local Chinese restaurant. They stiff him on the tips one week, and he says if he doesn't get his fair share, he'll tell everyone about the rice. What with the rice, you might ask? Well, he was instructed when busing to take rice on the table, wipe it into the bowl of rice, and bring it back to the kitchen for reuse. Table rice being reused. The infamous line is the manager saying to him, "You shut up! You shut up now!" giving him his tip money and him never going back. And then he told everyone anyway, right? Ate at Red Robin, and they had those tablets on the table that does everything your server does except drop food off. I think we saw our server twice. At the end of the meal, we go to pay with a card using the tablet, and it automatically hikes the tip to 18% or 20%. You can change it, and I did. But why am I going to tip 18% when I didn't really get service? Another Red Robin, we sat, 5 minutes go by, 10, 15 minutes. No one has come to the table, and this Red Robin doesn't have a tablet. So after 20 minutes, we got up and left. Don't go to Red Robins anymore. Especially dirty if they don't pay their waitstaff enough to compensate for the lack of tips because of those new machines. Maybe it's that location. Red Robin by me has great service. My favorite chain place for sure. Went to Olive Garden. I got pasta Alfredo, and at the bottom of my dish there was plastic. Not like a tiny piece, but the entire wrapper for Parmesan cheese. I gagged. When I was little, we got a gallon of store-bought brand ice cream. There was a full plastic shopping bag mixed in. I'm trying to wrap my head around how this happened. They bring out food quickly after I order. It's lukewarm. I send it back. I hear the microwave ding. They bring it out, still cold in the center. They put their finger in the center to verify. They bring it back. Ding. May I have a to-go box? Disgusting. Can we just clarify that this is okay to do at home for yourself with clean hands? One of my relatives has a prosthetic leg, and it's uncomfortable for him to stand for a long time, so he asked for a chair to sit in while waiting for a table. 10 minutes later, a waitress came over and said she needed the chair back. He explained his situation, but she snapped. "Well, I'm sorry, I need it. You'll have to get up." He shouted, "Screw this place," and stormed out. Good for him. I have 2 restaurants I'm never going back to. The first is Buffalo Wild Wings. They messed up our order, overcharged us, and wouldn't listen to us when we called out their mistake. To top it all off, half of the wings were undercooked. We didn't notice at first because of the dim lights, but I took a bite and said, "Does this feel cold?" And someone else said, "Yeah, mine too." So they used their phone flashlight and it was bright pink. I dropped my phone at one point and the floor was disgusting. Also, I think our waiter was on coke or something because he was super antsy and made some big mistakes. The second is a small restaurant in the Black Hills of South Dakota. We saw they had a special for an all-you-can-eat catfish, so we go. The salad bar was really good, and it was clear this was a mom-and-pop type of operation. It took forever for the food to come out, and the waitress apologized, saying their cook went home sick. I never did get more than 1 plate of catfish. Go back a year later hoping maybe things were better because the food was amazing, but nope, they were still understaffed and really slow. The lady running the place clearly had no idea how to run a restaurant. I feel bad, but I don't have 2 hours to burn to wait for my food. Buffalo Wild Wings is way too overstimulating for me. I can't ever go back there because I'm afraid I'd get a migraine from the loud music, dim lights, and gratuitous amounts of TVs. Also, my dad found the little plastic tab from a bag of hamburger buns in his food when my family went for the first and last time. Nope. Steak and Shake south of Houston. Went in and the staff didn't really seem to give a crap, but whatever. Ordered a Royale and it was delicious, until I noticed the mold on the bottom of the bun. Not just a little either. I'm talking multicolored nasty-ass moldy bun on a burger I had eaten like a third of. I showed it to the waiter who seemed stoned and he just said, "Oh, I'm sorry man. Do you want something else?" I asked for the manager who didn't charge us and gave us a coupon for a free meal later that we never used. I vomited in the parking lot before we left. Went to a sushi restaurant that a friend recommended. The place was empty and we were the only customers. We waited like 20 minutes just for the waiter to tell us they didn't have the dish that one of my friends ordered. They ran out of meat, and the rice I ordered was cold. That's probably why you were the only customers. Students, what was the biggest teacher meltdown you have ever witnessed? I don't know if it really counts, but our former Latin teacher once slapped a kid across the face because the kid made fun of her dead husband. She got suspended shortly afterwards. I hope the kid was also suspended. I don't remember it correctly, but I don't think he was. Junior year in university, my genetics professor was in the middle of a lecture when authorities took him out of the auditorium, thank goodness, and informed him that his wife, the dean of our college, had been struck and killed by a motor vehicle that morning. He retreated to his office and proceeded to tear the place apart as if a tornado had gone through it. He ripped the top of his desk off of its frame and pulled down all of his bookcases, books, pages, papers, all sorts of documents and furniture strewn everywhere in pieces. By the time I graduated, he still wasn't the same man as he was before that awful day. To be fair, that's a pretty solid reason to tear apart an office if there ever was one. In high school, our government teacher freaked out on my class. We had a few talkers in the back corner, but they finally broke him. He flipped his podium lectern over and started screaming at us. He called us the worst group of kids he'd ever had to teach, and that he was 110% accurate that we were going to be nothing. Then he went to his desk and drank his entire thermos of coffee. A few years later, he was having a retirement party at his house. I was a close friend with his son. He revealed that the thermos was 80% alcohol and 20% coffee. What the heck is wrong with that guy? Drinking coffee and alcohol in front of all those students? What if they found out? He could have been a terrible influence on them for the rest of their lives. Whiskey goes in coffee, not alcohol. He's onto something though. Alcohol adds a bit of sweetness to the coffee without altering the actual taste too much. I tried whiskey in there and I preferred alcohol. Source: divorce. Maybe not a meltdown per se, but I had a chemistry class that was held in a huge auditorium with really steep stairs. The professor always walked all around the room while we took quizzes and tests. One day, he tripped halfway up the auditorium stairs and took a hell of a fall. He landed face down unhurt, apart from bruises on the floor, and before we could really react, he starts banging his fists on the floor and screaming, "Entropy! Entropy! Entropy!" That sounds like a recovery. Sounds like a measurement of chaos. In primary school, some kids were misbehaving and she broke down into tears, started screaming and threw a chair. We never saw her again. She turned into one of the kids. Year 9 maths class. Our teacher was off sick and an early 20s substitute teacher came in to cover. She was lovely, kind, and friendly, although a bit timid and shy. One girl in our class used a fountain pen to flick ink on a skirt she was wearing one day. The poor woman noticed her do it, didn't say a word, and just went to her desk, put her head in her hands, and sobs, doesn't move for 10 minutes at least. Eventually, a friend of mine goes to get another teacher. The sub was escorted out, still crying, and was seen for the rest of the day just crying in her car. Didn't move for another 4 hours or so. It was probably her only work outfit, and she wasn't making enough to buy anything else to wear. Similar thing happened with a new sub in high school. They have it rough. I'm starting to think teachers deserve more tips than any other jobs. I had a Spanish teacher in middle school that was so tired of us turning in broken Spanish on our homework assignments that she screamed at us and called us stupid Americans before throwing pieces of chalk at us one after the other. Another time, she got on her knees and started praying the rosary in front of us when a girl said, "El pollo nugget." El pollo nugget. Haha! That sounds like me after 6 years of French. Le microwave pour l'hétable food. I did pass that year, 53%. We had a physical education teacher who sweat whenever sexual subjects were raised. He ended up having to be a substitute teacher for one of our sex ed lessons. We were very aware of his discomfort discussing the subject and asked him lots of in-depth questions, making sure we used all the correct anatomical terminology. The guy had a Class A anxiety attack. Pity no one had taught us about those, and I was genuinely afraid he was going to have a heart attack. Red face, profuse sweating, breathing difficulty, and a look of primal terror in his eyes. We got the early mark we were fishing for, but I think we did the poor fellow some real emotional damage. We had a religion teacher who loved the sex talk. We were 15 in an all-girl Catholic school in Ireland, so you can imagine how off-limits sex talk was. Our sex ed was a discussion on menstruation and pretty much nothing else, because sex is bad, yo. So we got this substitute religion teacher one day. Only male teacher in the school. He's crazy for the sex talk. Starts telling us stuff about STDs and how you can catch them from sitting on a toilet, how sex works, how much men love sex, all while getting into a sweat. To top it all off, he used his hands to demonstrate how to use a condom. Apparently, you should stretch it, one end in each hand, as far as your arms will stretch before using it. After that, I spoke to our normal religion teacher. He was subbing her because she was doing exam work with another grade, because he was giving such bullcrap information. Turns out he'd called a 13-year-old chick sexy too, so he was fired. I was in the band. One day, one of the regular, always in trouble disruptive students was being extra disruptive while the director was trying to tell us something important. So after about 5 different times of going the normal route to get him to settle down, he cracked. It got quiet and then the director bellowed, "Student's name! Are you stupid or just don't give a crap?" The whole room was quiet. All eyes were now on the disruptive kid who was then trying to hide behind his tuba, and then the director continued with his announcement like nothing happened. Of course it was the tuba player. Bunch of misfits they are. I played trombone, so I'm well versed in the ways of the low brass mafia. My 8th grade algebra teacher, also a German teacher, Mr. Cogburn, was an interesting guy. He was tall, had a kind of wild-looking frizzy gray hair and beard, and had a sort of boisterous, larger-than-life kind of personality. He started every class by slamming the door and yelling. He yelled, or as I would realize once I got into theater in high school, he projected through the entire class period, though he never really came across as intimidating. He always had a yardstick in his hand that he would slap forcefully against the blackboard to emphasize what he was saying. He would also slap it against the desks of students who weren't paying attention, though he was exceedingly careful to not actually hit the student. It wasn't terribly uncommon for him to break yardsticks, and there was always another in the supply cabinet to replace the one that he'd broken. He had a little song and chant that he made up for remembering the slope-intercept form of an equation for a line that I will probably remember until the day I die. He also gave the most effective, and to 8th graders both hilarious and embarrassing, explanation of how to divide fractions. He stood on a desk and told us, always divide the top. Here he pointed at his head, by the bottom. Here he turned around and pointed at his own ass. Never divide the bottom, because the bottom, here he helpfully gestured up and down the length of his ass, is already divided. That's what Mr. Cogburn was like. He was big and loud and crazy, but not in a scary way. We told new students that the way to tell he was actually mad was as if he started the class by shutting the door like a normal person and speaking quietly, and that was when they should be scared. Now we get to the story of the meltdown. Every year, our school did an event called a mathathon. Students were given math worksheets and tried to solve as many math problems as they could in a set amount of time. People, usually the parents, would sponsor the students, pledging a certain amount of money for each problem correctly solved, and at the end, the money was donated to a local charity that helps the disabled. It was that time of year, and Mr. Cogburn was explaining the mathathon to my class, and when he got to the part about the charity and what they did, one boy, who probably thought himself incredibly cool and edgy, loudly said, "I don't know why anyone bothers to help those R words. We should just let them all die." And Mr. Cogburn transformed. As I said before, the dude was tall, well over 6 feet, but his height never came across as imposing at all. Now he loomed over that student's desk like the goddamn angel of death. He seemed to physically radiate pure rage. I swear to all that's holy, you could feel his outrage coming off of him in waves. Even though he was focused solely on that one boy, students halfway across the room sank down in their chairs in pure terror, trying to disappear under their desks. I know because I was one of them. We couldn't even look at him. Not out of the usual, crap, he's mad, don't make eye contact instinct most people have, but more like it was a form of physical protection. He was a burning sun of anger, and if we looked directly at that sun, it might blind us. He spoke very, very quietly to the boy for about a minute. I didn't make out what he said. Then he led the kid out of the room and shut the door. About a quarter of the class started crying as soon as he left. After a while, the other math teacher came in and taught for the rest of that period. What we all found out later, and which none of us, including that boy, had known, was that Mr. Cogburn's daughter, who he spoke about to us frequently enough, was not his only child. He and his wife had also had a son that was born extremely physically disabled, and who had died at a very young age from health complications arising from those disabilities. When he took that student out of the room, I think we all thought he was going to kill him. He actually just took him down to the principal and explained what the kid had said, and the kid was suspended for a day. Mr. Cogburn also took the rest of the day off. So that was the biggest meltdown I ever saw from a teacher, and it was sort of an inverse of a normal meltdown. When he was shouting, gesticulating wildly and hitting our desks with yardsticks, we loved the guy and feared nothing. But that day he got so quiet, we felt mortal terror. Agree. Amazing story. Much respect for that teacher. This was in high school. We had a band teacher. His nickname was Pinky because he had very red hair and pale skin with a red tint, borderline albino. Every time he got mad, his entire face turned tomato red. I don't remember the sequence of events, but he was already frustrated. Everyone in the room knew to shut up so that we didn't piss him off. Well, everyone except this one dippy girl. She asked something along the lines of, "Are you mad?" and kept pestering him. He finally snapped. His face turned that familiar shade of tomato red, and he threw the pencil that he was using to conduct across the room. He then stormed out and slammed the door hard enough that it could be heard on the other side of the building. He quit soon after. I've seen it firsthand. Being a high school band director is hard enough without kids trying to intentionally bother you. A lot of band teachers at the high school level quit after a few years. The band director I work for in the fall has to deal with so much crap from parents, it's ridiculous. A lot of the parents are pretty cool, but there's always at least one crazy a year. So being a band teacher is similar to the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. We had an art teacher in year 7, 11 years old, who would lock himself in the supply cupboards and scream and rip his hair out. It was unsettling. It's his art. I had an art teacher, we'll call him Bob Smith, who would write his own quotes on the board, like in this format. I'm just making something up, but it was cheesy like this. "The only limits to your imagination are the ones you put on it." Quote by Bob Smith. It was super cringy. Not so much a breakdown, but a break in normal behavior for sure. Our freshman English teacher was a small, soft-spoken woman who was kind of known to be a teacher that you could walk all over with little, but not no repercussions. We were in a review session after school, and some upperclassmen were just hanging out in the hallways making lots of noise, so she was constantly poking her head out into the hall asking them to be quiet. As we are all very silent reading or something, the classroom door absolutely slammed shut, so hard the latch didn't have time to catch, and the door bounced back open. The teacher immediately yells, "Oh, hell no," kicks off her heels and takes off out the door. She caught up with the kid who had taken a running start and kicked the door shut, and berated him for a good 10 minutes, which we could hear clear as day from the end of the hall. It was like nothing that we'd ever heard from her. Yeah, you know, when the heels come off, serious crap is about to go down. Pursuit mode has been engaged. In high school, I turned in a form to my science teacher a day late. She screamed at me, walked out of the classroom, and was gone for nearly an hour. The class had started and everyone had speculations, blaming me for what happened. The teacher comes back, joyful and smiling, and says she just needed a walk around campus to recover. I'm surprised they blamed anyone for the teacher leaving. My high school would probably have thrown a party. If this was physics, and during the last year of high school, my peers would have been mad. I taught public high school for 7 years and have been teaching at a university ever since. Every time one of these threads pops up, I expect to find the story of how I once broke down in tears when a cell phone rang in class, or the time I threw up in a trash can, brushed my teeth with a bottled water right in front of all 42 of them, asked a janitor to come down and take the trash out, and went back to teaching after my favorite student of all time faked barfing noises because he knew it would make me puke. For future reference, brushing your teeth after vomiting is a very bad idea. Rinse with water or mouthwash, but don't brush or rub your teeth. The acid in your vomit softens your teeth, and brushing them while they're soft can strip away a lot of the enamel, which is bad. Likewise, don't brush within 30 to 60 minutes of eating. Holy crap, I always do that to get the horrible taste out though. If I didn't have mouthwash, would me just rubbing toothpaste all over my mouth have the same effect? 10th grade was in math class, and the teacher was getting frustrated, and not everyone was understanding a problem that he made various threats on that he would do if we didn't figure it out. More homework, tests, etc. I kept asking questions because I legitimately didn't understand, and he yelled, "Oh, heck's sake!" and threw an eraser at me. I got up and left. Never ratted him out, and the next day he was super patient with everyone. It was his, "Oh, I screwed up" moment. Reminds me of my math teacher in high school. A sweet old man just a few years from retirement, but not teacher material. His idea of teaching was that if you didn't understand something, he would explain it to you again, with the same words, in the same order, multiple times. He just could not understand why we had difficulty understanding his explanations. Sounds like my math teacher. Her lessons plan was to have the page from our textbook blown up on the screen. She would then read it. If anyone asked for help, she would then read it to them slowly. Had a sub in 5th grade. I was a really unorganized kid, and having to dig through my desk for crap wasn't uncommon. She got all towering and told me this was unacceptable, dumped my desk in front of me and told me I was staying in from recess to organize it. The whole class revolted, and a neighboring teacher came in to see what was up. The sub claimed I was being lippy and this was my punishment. Then the whole class spoke up and informed him of what really happened, and we were all let out for recess. came back in and a lunch lady was sitting at the teacher's desk instead. As the kid who was always picked on by everyone, it was nice to see the whole class stand up for me that day. This is an awesome story. People who go on power trips, especially when over children. A university professor, actually. She would teach and constantly complain about 3 girls who sat near the back for talking or being on their phones. One day, she made a big scene, took down their names, and left dramatically. This was a huge lecture hall of 100+ students. I heard them laughing once, but never anything else. I found her fixation on these 3 intolerable. During the exam, the rooms were organized, what seemed to me as horribly by last names. Not alphabetical, random last letters in different groups. She had seated the 3 in the same room and loudly spoke during the exam for a few minutes to distract them, except there were 40+ people in the room. I'm still bitter because it really distracted me. The teacher didn't handle that very well, but as a professor, myself, nothing pisses me off more than a group huddle and people around with their devices during a lecture. If I was a teacher and out to get them, I would have made sure they sat next to each other and wait for one of them to speak to the other and call it cheating and eject them from the test room. After our class picture, our first-year teacher declared, "New rule, every day is now class picture day. I want to see smiles from each and every one of you every single day." The class let out a collective groan and the teacher said, "Come on, turn those frowns upside down." She kept at us for a good month on the smile policy. Keep in mind that this was during the 90s. The class was divided evenly amongst goths, grunge, and gangstas. The only thing we agreed upon was that smiles were for pussies. The meltdown came one day when she brought in her karaoke machine and attempted to sing Tim McGraw's "Just to See You Smile." We just sat there stone-faced as usual, then she tried to ham it up just to get us to laugh, but nothing. We were all too tough to show any humor or heart. And then she broke down and started blubbering, "I just wanted to smile. Is that too much to ask?" Apparently it was because none of us had the goddamn common courtesy to offer her a tissue. The next day, she went resting bish face on our asses, and the word on the street is that she hasn't cracked a smile in 20 years. Wow, you witnessed the breaking moment. Decades from now, her students will still wonder what shattered her goodwill so utterly and irretrievably. Junior year of high school, I decided to take a psychology class. The administration switched a lot of teachers around that year and hired a lot of new ones too, so I didn't know anything about him. As the semester goes on, his behavior starts slipping and the class starts noticing. He begins to lose his patience more and more frequently when the class doesn't respond to a question immediately. His behavior then progressed to him throwing whiteboard markers at students for not paying attention or answering incorrectly. Then one day, about half of the way into the semester, he completely loses it. A group of 3 students laughed at something within their own conversation just as class was starting, and our teacher saw and made a comment to the class that if we weren't going to listen, he would make today hell. Some kids spoke up saying he would go to the principal if he did anything to hurt the class, so the teacher began throwing markers, erasers, and anything he could find at the student. The student got up to leave for the principal's, and the teacher stood up on his desk and screamed at us. He ran to the front of the classroom, where the student who spoke out was, picked up a desk and threw it at the student. Thankfully, it didn't hit him, but the teacher ran to the door to prevent anyone from leaving and said if anyone told anything about that day to anyone, he would ruin our lives. Some friends and I told the principal and administration, and I actually had to go into court to testify. Turns out the guy suffers from schizophrenia as well as some degree of PTSD after serving in the military. I don't remember what ended up happening with him. At the time, I really didn't care to know. Bummer. I really wanted to hear this end with something like, at the end of the semester, he tied his erratic behavior to a lesson plan. Some kind of Dead Poets Society crap or something. We had a psych teacher in 11th grade that, fake, reversed graded the first big exam. All the smart kids did bad and didn't understand why. The couple broke down. He quickly blended that into the next lesson and handed out the proper grades at the end of class. That's cool and all, but imagine getting a 98 just to realize you actually got a 57. My super dorky history teacher in 8th grade was the nicest teacher I've ever met, but there were a couple of class clowns in our class, and he usually dealt with them okay. One day, though, they were obnoxious to the entire class from the moment he walked in, and he snapped, yelling and chucking his stapler across the room. He nailed a staple right into Ben Franklin's forehead. He immediately apologized and went about his day normally, while all the students went silent. Nobody ever bothered him again after that day. Surprised Ben didn't go to the principal about that. Ben Stapleton was never the same after that event. In my elementary school, there was this one super obnoxious kid named Lance, who was constantly goofing off and all of that. Though in all honesty, he probably had ADHD without a good support system. Most of our teachers were used to dealing with him, but one day we had this substitute named Mr. Blake, who had no idea what to do with him and all of our class. He was mouthing off every other moment and jumping around like crazy when she starts to boil over and yells at Lance to sit down, which he does. He then calls her a bish or something under his breath, and she finished her transformation into a boiling tomato. She yells, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" which blew our little elementary school minds and then very violently shook his desk. The thing was, Lance had a blood condition that made him bruise very easily and very dramatically. When she shook his desk, he started crying, understandably, because he was getting these massive purple-black bruises all over his legs. She was banned from our school after that. That's awful. When I was in year 2, there was a kid with a similar condition, so even if he got the tiniest bit scratched or bruised, he would have to go to the hospital. I had a history teacher in high school. For context, this was in about 1980. To this day, I can't quite recall what prompted this, but he stood in front of the entire class shaking with rage and said, "I am a homosexual." We were all just dumbfounded. Not that he was gay, I think most of us had figured that out already, but that he felt obligated to make that announcement. "Michael, you can't just say homosexuality and expect everything to be better." "I did not say it, I declared it." 8th grade math teacher was well known for his short temper, but this particular day was bad. There was a kid in my class, Justin, that never listened and never did his homework. One day, the math teacher just had it with Justin, grabbed his desk with him in it, and picked it up and slammed it back down on the ground a few times. After that, he shoved the desk with Justin in it across the room. Justin was fine, thankfully. The math teacher just stormed out, told my mom, and I guess a few other parents called the school about it too. He was gone for a few weeks and had to take anger management classes. I just went by my old middle school a few weeks ago, and he's the assistant principal now. Who would have expected that? He got promoted to management. Probably not a bad idea. Must have been anger management classes. What tiny thing annoys you? Those fake download buttons that make me have to reinstall my grandma's OS every other month. Install an ad blocker next time, it removes the fake buttons. She learned how to turn it off because it ruins her favorite websites by blocking the ads that she likes. For me, it's when you ask someone to close the door as they're leaving the room, but they leave it open just a crack instead. So basically everyone's mom? Holy crap, this is too real. Do all hospitals all over the world issue a handbook to new moms or something? Why is this a standard? Slow people walking in groups that take the whole sidewalk. Oh, the horror. Neanderthals. Well, there's a term that I'll be using for the rest of my life. People who play games on their phones at full volume, or people who text with the texting sounds still on, or people who have their sound turned up so far up that you can hear the person they're talking to. Autoplay videos with the volume on regular web pages, not video service sites, obviously. Nah, in fact, any website with autoplay music or sound, it is insane. I love these browsers that have the little speaker icon now. Makes it easier to spot the culprit. Do you know what would be better? Browsers that block any audio from a web page until you allow it. When shoppers hog the middle of the grocery aisle, oblivious to others trying to pass by as they look over items on the shelves. It's worse when they turn their cart sideways too. Jesus! Had this happen the other day, but they weren't even looking at anything. They were just talking, and so I moved their cart to get by and they said, "Excuse you?" And already being annoyed at people for doing this, I just blurted out, "Well, get out of the way." When people do not wait for others to disembark on any form of transport, attempting to exit the train doors and being hit back by some impatient twat is the most irritating thing. Oh my god. I called an elevator yesterday and 3 guys in suits were inside when it opened. They were chatting, looking at each other. I waited a couple of seconds and then stepped in. The dude chatting stepped forward and put his hand on my shoulder, stopping me. "Why don't you wait for us to get off before you get on?" Okay? Ruined my day. I did wait. Why don't you move your ass instead of peeing about on the elevator? When you lean forward in a car and the seatbelt catches, so you lean back to reset it and the same thing happens. But hey, at least I know they work. You'll be thankful for those when you get rear-ended in a car park at a walking pace, firing the seatbelt pre-tensioner for whatever reason, pulling you so far back into your seat that you're no longer driving the car, you are the car. To understand the car, you must be one with the car, even if it means getting rear-ended. When my earphones get snatched by something, instant rage. Oh man, that's reason number 1 why I bought a pair of wireless headphones. It's not just annoying, it really hurts too. One of the worst things about headphone wire rage is you don't even know who or what to be mad at. The crap just happens in a flash. Sitting at a red light when I'm the only one at the intersection. What about when you pull up to a stop sign that someone has already stopped at, four-way, and they try to let you go first to be nice? You had the right of way, buddy. If you had just gone, we would have all departed sooner. People who break the road rules just to be nice? Screw you, asshole, you're confusing everyone. Headers on websites that follow you down the page. This is less because of the header itself and more because they universally become gigantic when zooming the page. And I have bad eyes, so I rarely have my browser on less than 150%, usually 170%. And then the goddamn header frequently takes up practically a full fourth to a third of my browser window. Goddamn floating headers. Mobile websites. I load a site and it appears instantly. I see the text, the images, everything. Then that crap disappears and starts loading slowly piece by piece. And once you've got to that piece of text that made you scroll through the website, forget about that sucker. The page jumps to the top because it has loaded some button or ad or something. Infuriating. Or when you're trying to click a link and the website header graphic loads and pushes everything down a bit and you hit the banner for the new Clash of Clans clone. When someone doesn't let you or others finish what they were saying. The only friend I have in my classes does this a lot. It'll be like, forget what anyone else is saying, I have something better. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. Cutting me off a couple of seconds into what I'm saying is not a big deal. Honest mistake, really. I do it myself. But when people cut me off when I'm in the middle of saying something, I get real mad, guys. Especially if they're not saying anything related to what I was trying to say and are speaking like they didn't even know what I was talking about. There's a few people in my life like this. And what makes it even more frustrating is when we're debating something and I'm trying to say the same thing they are, but they don't realize that because I never get a complete thought out. Then when I say, yeah, I agree, they act like they've convinced me of their point, and I just give up. Cigarette butts on the ground in a smoking area. The ashtray is right there. In my neighborhood, there's a lot of mulch in front of the apartment buildings, and there are signs telling people not to toss their cigarette butts into the mulch because it'll start a fire, but people still do it. When you accidentally close the music app. When people, my mom for example, use way too many words to get across a point or question, etc. 911 call taker / dispatcher here. It's amazing how people still do this even when calling 911 for serious emergencies, like heart attacks, car accidents, etc. Caller. So I was getting coffee and trying to pay with the exact change when the cashier was being rude and my brother Brian was trying to get his order in at the same time and I was telling him, Sir, we are on a 911 line. What is the emergency? Oh, right, the cafe is on fire. Yeah, I know how you feel. Not as urgent, but that makes it easier for people to ramble. I'm the operations manager for a public transit agency, and sometimes I'll cover dispatch, and I'll have someone call in like this. Them. So the other day I had gone out to eat with my brother. He used to live in Missouri, but he moved back here about 3 years ago. His son just turned 5, and he wanted to be closer to the grandparents because of how much he loved being with them at Christmas. And he found this nice house over off Terry Street. Me. So are you wanting to set up pickup at Terry Street? Them. Oh no, not at all. So we were having lunch at that new Mediterranean place. It's alright, but I don't know how long it'll last. I don't think people like ordering food that has a name that's hard for them to say. Like, I can say falafel, but people that aren't me have a hard time with it, you know? And it's a little expensive, and I can't really justify going there very often. Me. Weren't you wanting to schedule a pickup? Them. Oh, no, I saw bus XYZ on the north side of town today run someone off the road. Me. That's not possible. That bus isn't in service today. Them. Well, you're a liar. Me. We're done here. Using Reddit on my mobile and trying to click a link, but end up minimizing that comment, so I gotta go in with my sausage fingers and click on it, but accidentally minimize a response. Happened to be twice on this thread alone. Stepping in a puddle of water in my kitchen or bathroom right after I put on fresh, clean socks. My roommate always wears shoes around the house and doesn't seem to understand how to use sinks, so water is always all over everything, but it never bothers him because he's wearing shoes. It makes me want to strangle him when I step in a puddle with my socks on. Come to think of it, people who wear shoes in the house piss me off. When you're eating and your fork decides that it wants to make an awfully high-pitched screech when it barely grazes the plate. When you're eating, you pull the fork out as you bite. but you're too slow and you bite the tips of the prongs. It just feels wrong. Any sticker that you can't peel off in one piece. Absolutely infuriating. Or when the sticker comes off, but the industrial-grade NASA-certified glue that they used leaves a residue on the product that seems to never ever come off. No matter what solvent you may try to use, that spot is always sticky. Pisses me right off. People who listen to music on their phone in public without using headphones. I ask them to turn it off every time it happens somewhere I have to be for any length of time, and without fail, the person doing it acts as if I'm the one being unreasonable. Try doing this in a major city. You will die. This is exactly the only place I see people ballsy enough to tell the wannabe DJs to knock it off. People leaving shopping carts in the parking lot. The other day I see some asshat just leave his cart in the space next to his car, so I walked over and moved his cart so it was directly behind his car, forcing him to get out and move it again. Okay, so I actually just angrily grabbed the cart and pushed it into the cart corral in a huff, but I totally thought about leaving it behind his car. My husband actually did this once. We had our 6-month-old son with us and had parked at the back of the cart corral. I guess people were too lazy to go around and started leaving their carts in the empty spot beside us. As we're walking back to the car, me with the baby strapped to my chest, him pushing a cart full of stuff, we watch as this woman walks up and just leaves her cart right beside the passenger door. My husband calmly says, "Excuse me, can you move that?" But she starts walking away back to her car. Now he was clearly sleep deprived and stressed, and this small act of rudeness just pushed him over the edge. He grabbed 2 carts, walked to where her car was parked, and before she got the chance to start backing out, he placed the carts right behind her car and walked away. People who don't use their turn signal. People who put on their turn signal as they're turning and not before. When people use the microwave, remove their food before the time has expired and then don't clear the time remaining. Double asshole points when they leave the microwave door open. I work in a kitchen at a resort, and our office staff come in and use the microwave. So many of them leave the damn door open, it's amazing. I bet the microwave doors at their houses are shut tight. Occasionally, I keep the microwave door open to clear the odor from the food. Then again, I live alone, so what do I know? Clipping your nails in public, especially in any enclosed area like an airplane. People aren't that oblivious, surely? Once sat next to a dude on a plane who started clipping his toenails, next to a 9-year-old girl, me. I just stared horrified for a minute, then quickly paged the attendant, who immediately guessed what my issue was and told the guy he had to go do that sort of thing in the restroom once the seatbelt restriction was off. I would have politely asked him to stop, but since he was gross and rude enough to do that in public to begin with, I figured I might get a bad response, so I just let the adults handle him. Those little stickers on fruit. Hate them. Also, when thrift stores staple the price tags onto leather goods, right onto the leather. Also, stickers on kitchen utensils and tools. Like, what, on the blade itself? Not even the handle? Inside the bowl? And if you want to show your brand, you have to stick it on part of the plate where I put my food? I'm not from the US, by the way, so you may have some regulations against these, but man, this just doesn't make any sense. I once bought this lovely bamboo cutting board and had a giant sticker wrapped around it. No matter what I did, there was sticky crap on both sides of it forever. I'm getting kind of mad thinking about it. When there are no lines painted in a row of car parking spaces, but it's clearly big enough for 3 cars and either one or both idiots park in a way that a third car won't fit. I'm on the same vein. When something like this is done for street parking, 2 cars taking what could easily be 3 spots is infuriating. People who don't flush, and people that piss all over the toilet seat and just leave it there. If you sprinkle when you tinkle, be a sweetie and wipe the seatie. Customers who pay in cash out of their bra or pants pocket and the bills are all folded and wadded up. One bill has been ripped and taped back together, and they lay the money as far to the side of the counter as possible, so I have to reach over their 5 bottles of assorted cleaning chemicals to get it. Want to make sure your cashier doesn't hate you? Here's how. Get a wallet or money clip, flatten out all of your bills, hand them to me. How about people who throw their bills across the counter at you instead of handing them over, and some of the money goes flying off the counter and you have to pick it up off the floor? Jesus Christ, everyone who's ever come into my store, just hand me the money and quit throwing it at me like I'm a B-squad stripper. When I was maybe 15, I was buying a fountain soda at a convenience store. I handed the cashier my money and he stopped to thank me for actually handing it to him. He said I was the first customer all day who hasn't tossed my money on the counter at him. It made quite an impression. That was 15 years ago, and I still always hand my payments to the cashier. I also make sure to make eye contact, smile at them, and thank them at the end of the transaction. I like to think that it makes a tiny difference in their day. Maybe I'm overly optimistic and creepy, who knows? Inconsistent formatting. 1. A sign at my university is in all caps apart from one line. 2. People who leave a space before their comma, like this. 2. People who don't count the numbers in their lists, like this. Why does this happen? Who taught 10 to 20% of the population to do this? Slow people in the fast lane, especially on a 2-lane highway. The limit is 130, and in the left lane, most go 140 or something. You're passing with 110, making me slam my brakes because you just had to pass right when I was coming up. It took me a minute to realize you're obviously not talking about miles per hour. For a second there, I just thought you were metal AF and drove at breakneck speeds. Turn your lights on when you're driving in the rain, and don't turn your brights on when you're driving in fog. Not covering your damn mouth when you cough or sneeze. I always use my elbow, but now every time I sneeze or cough, someone yells, "Dab!" One day I will get a fatal and contagious disease and purposefully not cover my mouth when I cough or sneeze, so I can watch them die slowly with me. Unexpected phone calls or doorbells. I hate being called if I don't know the number, and I hate when the doorbells ring and I have no idea what it could be. Instantly sinks my stomach and annoys me. Are you my dog? When a stoplight turns green and it takes people more than a second to start moving. Also, when a sticker won't easily come off. You know what I'm talking about. The ones that no matter how you peel, just rip and leave a bunch of sticker crap residue all over your thing. Yeah, I had this neighbor who would leave for work around the same time as me every morning. There's a small stoplight on the way out of the neighborhood where it was always just me and him coming out, no other cars. Almost every morning, he'd honk at me the second the light turned green, even when I was already going. Finally, the next time he did it, I sat there and waited and looked back at him and made eye contact and waited. He stopped honking at me after that. When I let someone in because they were dumb while driving, and I don't get so much as a wave. Ungrateful bastards. Where's my thank you wave? Hi, how are you? Pack of Marlboro Reds. Ah, I too have worked as a gas station clerk. Or the infamous, "Can I get $5 on my pump?" "Oh yes, I watched you come in here and I know which car is yours and which pump you're at. Thanks, you can leave now." Or, "Can I get 20 on the white truck?" "There are 4 white trucks out there, sir." My toddler. Why does he have to get up at 6 a.m. and paint the bathroom with toothpaste? Because if he doesn't do it, who else is going to? I pictured a little kid with a frustrated look on his face, smearing toothpaste on the counters and mumbling, "I'm the only one in this house that does anything useful." I can't stop laughing. Send help. YouTube videos that use the artificial voice thing. What about the ones that always start, "Hey there guys and girls, it's me again, your boy the YouTube phenomenon. Before we get started, can I get you to like and subscribe to all my videos and channel?" Geez, that's annoying. Then there are the 3-minute videos with opening and closing theme songs. Loud pickup trucks revving and gunning it. My house is less soundproof than a microphone, and my next door neighbor's kid has a very, very loud, very, very modded truck. Sometimes, and by that I mean 2 times a week or so, he'll just sit in their driveway for 30 minutes or so and just rev the engine, see how loud he can get it. I hate that boy, and I've never met him. I'm going to order you a "My mother says she wishes I would have been a BJ" bumper sticker to slap on his truck. When some young aggressive mothers use their babies in pushchairs to force traffic to let them across the road. Yeah, I know it's busy and difficult to cross, but hey, that's a human being you've got there. You need to stop that. Back in my country, we just stop the traffic with our hand. Just raise them a bit and the cars will avoid you or stop. There's a joke about it. Those people who got hit by a car while crossing the street, that's because they didn't use their power of hand. I'm in Central Europe now. I only need to stand at the zebra line to get the car to stop. I feel so powerful. When I'm watching a movie I like with friends after I recommended it, and they are on their phones within the first 5 minutes before even giving it a chance. Double bonus points if they say then 10 minutes into the movie, I don't get the point of this movie after paying zero attention. My favorite is when my girlfriend insists that she can multitask by playing on her phone and watching something and then asks me to explain something or says that was dumb. Or God forbid we're watching something for the first time and she goes, "Wait, what's going to happen?" Like, I don't know. I haven't seen this either. I get a call from some company or whatever, a collections call, salesperson, doesn't matter, and I hear, "Please hold while we connect you to the next available representative." I immediately hang up. If you're calling me and using my time and expect me to wait, screw you. If you can't call me and be there on the other end when I pick up, don't call me at all. I freaking hate this too. Why should I have to hold when you called me? I always hang up. When I can't find something I'm looking for, nothing throws me into a rage faster than wasting time looking for something I need. And it's not even like, well then keep your crap organized, because it'll be something that I know should have been somewhere and isn't. When people hush their conversation to a murmur when you walk by them. I know you're talking about me, damn it. Or absolutely stop talking when you get into the room. When you're washing your face with long sleeves and the water runs down your arms. When you wake up next to a drool spot and accidentally put your cheek on it while you're still trying to relax. Get any amount of water on your sock. When you put on a black shirt and accidentally leave deodorant marks on the outside. When you don't cancel the microwave in time and it proceeds to beep 5 times no matter what you do. When you're running late and your car is covered in frost or ice. When you're trying to take a nap, and just as you're dozing off, someone tries to get your attention from a different room, and when you don't respond, they call again. What? When your music gets interrupted for any reason. When your shirt gets wrinkled from sitting down. Switching into power saver mode. My blood pressure just went up a little after reading this. When my boyfriend takes out the trash but never replaces the trash bag. It's like stopping mid-chore. You need to replace the bag, damn it. Psh, it's called teamwork. One team member takes out the trash and the other team member puts a bag in. What are you, not a team player or something? You need more light in this room. It's dark. Mom proceeds to pull the window blinds. I've always wondered why people think it's just cool to take it upon themselves to go, "You need to prefer or change this," and then acts on it. Like, what? Why? Who actually does this? People who don't show the slightest bit of urgency to get out of the way when they are walking in a parking lot. I don't expect you to run, but don't look at me like I owe you something. That's just rude. This is every student on a college campus. We all want you to hit us so that you can pay our tuition, or at least kill us so we don't have to go to class anymore. I love dogs, but I absolutely hate when a dog watches me eat something. I get that it's just kind of their thing, but I can't stand it. On the plus side, my roommate's dog knows what frick off means now. My dog climbs up on my shoulder. When I try to get him off, he slides down my back and then I have to get up because he's stuck between my back and the chair. People on public transit need 2 seats, one for them and one for their bag. I think this is fine unless the place gets full. Whenever I catch a bus or train, it's never busy, so then I do it. Same, I like to sit by myself so long it's not hindering anyone. Plus it makes it really easy to access the stuff in the said bag. Putting the $sign after the amount, like this, $50, like an absolute monster instead of before it, $50, like a productive member of society, annoys me percent 100 of the time. When someone tells me or reminds me to do something right as I am about to do it, or when I'm already doing it. Coworker, "Hey, don't forget to get those papers filed by the end of the day." Me, "What do you think this stack of papers I'm carrying is? Fodder for paper mache?" SO, "Remember to take out the trash." Me, "Thanks, hon. I didn't know what I was going to do with this plastic bag filled with refuse. Hell, if you didn't tell me what to do, I probably would have dumped it all over our bed. Glad we dodged that bullet." SO again, "Hey, can you go wash the dishes?" Me with soapy hands, "Well, I mean I can since I've got this sink full of water already, but it'll have to wait until I am done playing with my rubber ducky. I mean, I get it. I can't expect people to know what I am doing if I don't tell them. But it's just relentless. Honestly, I feel like everyone around me thinks that I forget everything at the drop of a hat, or that I can't remember my own name without someone reminding me. I'm a grown, responsible man. I know what needs to get done. Get off my back." Someone is riding my ass, passes me, and runs into one of the following scenarios. Gets stuck behind the car that was slowing me down. Proceeds to get stuck at the red light I was slowing for in the distance, then fails to accelerate when the light actually turns green, cuts me off and goes 10 miles under the speed limit. Also, people that blast past me in whiteout or dense fog conditions. I wish you a solo accident to punish you, and no one else, for your absolute reckless stupidity. Love when people try to pass obnoxiously when they can't see the cars in front slowing me down. I always make sure there isn't space for them to get in, so they are stuck right beside me and then I stare at them for at least 10 seconds until they notice. The shape of deodorant containers makes it so the slightest movement makes them fall over. It only gets worse as the deodorant gets used and becomes even more top-heavy. I never thought about this until now, and instantaneously I'm furious. When the cream cheese is too cold and won't spread easily on a bagel, that crap drives me up the wall.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.